Hello, everybody, and welcome once again, finally, to the Epic Heathen podcast.
Kun pielellä vartuessa kulki kuistos palavee. Aallot levätönä löivät vasten sateen lieksemään. Kauan hiljaisia vieneet sanot alla pohjoiseen. Vain yksinäinen vietuuden soi. Keihäskarhun kantajan massa saarin vierellä. Vain suurta laivaa sammuvaa.
What you have just heard is the same voices as the previous time: Sasan, Aleksi from France, myself, my two friends Vica and a different Alexi, with a guitar added by Sasan, mixed by him, mastered by him. To begin with, I must apologize that it took so long to release this second part of the Kivenkantaja episode. The reason was that, basically, in short, the Ukraine war. Fortunately, it didn't really affect me directly, but I am very much interested in whatever happens in Ukraine, so it was a big shock for me. I started following it, we could say almost obsessively, until, well, mid-April I decided that I have to do other things in life as well. And yeah, should go back to my normal life. So yeah, I started editing again and working on this. As for the episode we are going to hear, both halves were recorded in different days. For this second half, Francesco couldn't be present. He had something to do and he couldn't be with us. So we won't have his comments and opinions. And Aleksi from Finland had to go more or less in the middle of the conversation. So you will hear him in the first half, but then you won't hear him anymore. As a bit of a compensation, we have Leo again. Leo Aragon, the director of the Moonsorrow documentary Home of the Wind, who again brings quotes from the documentary recordings, as in quotes from the musicians themselves, and his sometimes abstract interventions. Other than that, we have the usual gang. So, in summary, there is myself, there is Sasan from the USA, there is Mikkel from Denmark, there is Thomas from France, there is Leo from the UK, and there is Aleksi from Finland for the first part of the show. Okay, that's enough introduction. Thank you for being there. Here we go.
Well, the next song in the album is Jumalten kaupunki, the City of Gods, whose working title, by the way, for reasons that I think can be clear for everybody, the working title was Battle War. Battle War. What do you people think of this song?
Super awesome.
I'm really waiting for Alexis to give us an interpretation of what the lyrics say.
Oh yeah, for sure.
We shall have that
Definitely.
later on.
Yeah. give the man some time.
So just to clarify something, the intro at the beginning, it's the part of the song called Tuat vuotinen perintö.
I thought that was the outro, but I don't know.
I think it is the outro, yeah.
On the CD, it's at the beginning, so I'm assuming it's the intro.
Oh.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
I just wanted to try to say the word. I've been practicing all week.
Success.
Great song. I'm saying that almost all the time, but I really enjoy the way it's built. This small intro that fades from the previous song, it's so smooth. It's cool. You're just arriving in a new song and you don't even notice it. And for myself, it remembers me a lot of the second album of Balsagot in terms of the way guitars and keyboards are mixed and played together. For me, it's my favorite song of the album and probably one of my favorite songs of Moonsorrow. So love that shit.
Agreed. Absolutely.
And let's not forget that Moonsorrow took the decision of making a video of this particular song, having Raunioilla and more songs in the album. So I think that the appreciation for the song is mutual in terms of the fans and also the band. The band knew the potential of this song from the very beginning. I don't know if it's because maybe, I don't know, if you all had the same sensation. I don't consider that it's a more universal song. I don't think it's a more accessible song. I think that, I don't know, the value of the song is more in how perfect it is, and that is not necessarily, that doesn't necessarily make it an easy song to to understand if you're not a Moonsorrow fan. I don't know, maybe it's just my appreciation, but definitely it's an important song for the band.
But it makes sense to make a clip with it because it's like very punchy, and when you listen to it the first time, you can easily remember some parts, and going back to it after, you can discover more and more stuff. And for like a single or a clip to share and to get new fans and stuff, it's a good choice.
But still, if we consider the video thing, maybe Abel can correct me on this, but there was not a requirement from Spinefarm, right, to do a video. It was something that they decided to do.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
right,
so.
Abel? Okay.
I think so. I don't remember.
So it's, I don't know, that's the curious part for me, because if we consider about, it is obviously a punchy song, but the point is like on the previous two albums, they already had things that we can consider hits that they could have used for a video, but they did not decide to do a video. So what makes this song in particular so important that Moonsorrow finally says, let's make a video out of it?
Honestly, I think it's as simple as probably the second album had some impact, some sales or whatever, and now the label said, okay, here is your money, make a video.
Could be.
The whole video thing is something that we need to talk about in a separate episode down the line, just because Moonsorrow's music is so cinematic, and maybe that's part of the reason why, but I don't think any like of the videos they've done have really ever matched the sound of Moonsorrow all that well, you know? It like, I think, for example, like Fintroll has videos that really work with the music. I think Moonsorrow is still trying to figure out some sort of visual element for. But yeah, the song is amazing. I think the reason why it's one of those songs where there's nobody that loves Moonsorrow that doesn't love this song. It might not be everybody's favorite song, but I can't imagine someone being like, I'm a big Moonsorrow fan, but you know what I can't stand is Jumalten Kaupunki. But I agree with Leo. It's interesting because it's maybe not, well, it's super catchy. It's not inaccessible, right? But it is long. It's just a very big song, right? It definitely seemed like they were trying to make this the kind of like climax of the album, which might contribute to what some of you were saying earlier about how, I think Aleksi especially, how the album kind of like feels slower in the second half. But I think it's awesome. I think it's, when I listen to it, the synth parts don't sound super real, right? It sounds a little bit like power metal or Manowar or Bathory or something like that, you know? It's just that comparison came to mind. I don't know why. But still, like, it makes it a little cheesy, but it's impossible not to, like, get into it. And we'll talk, I think, probably separately about the outro. But in my mind, the song's really in, like, those two parts. I think the main song, which is mostly what they would play live, is super big, super loud, catchy, fun. I think it has, a really infectious energy. The guitar parts, like there's little in-between sections on the guitar where the guitar is a little bit more involved, like the dun gun gun gun. But most of it is just chords that are held, like da 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 da. but it's cool. It works, and
in connection with that, I think that it's a song that aged really well. Not in terms of how old it is, but in terms of in our minds and for we experienced in the documentary. Like, for example, this happened. What you said about being fucking tired about the song happened with Matkan Lopussa. Like Micha was like, I'm fucking tired of playing this shit, or people asking us for this song, but no one expressed discomfort about Jumalt and how punky. And I think that if we all think about how many fucking zillion times we heard to the song, we all have a really fresh idea of how powerful the song is, and you don't really get tired of it. So I think that this song evokes a lot of respect towards Moonsorrow. It's like they portray really well the idea of what they want to do, and it is basically an immortal song for Moonsorrow, for the fans, for the metal community in general. I think it's really like, you know, it's a really good representation of Kivenkantaja, but it definitely aged really well, at least on my head, at least for what we saw on them. They just fucking still love the song. They are so proud of this song.
Yeah. Well, it avoids a lot of cliches too. It doesn't really, it's not, but Abel or you?
About what you said earlier of the song being long, so two things about that. One is that for the video, they made a shortened version. Doesn't have the intro, doesn't have the outro, and even the intro is short. The introduction to the actual Jumalten Kaupunki, not the blah 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 perito, that it was cut down. So there are fewer repetitions. So instead of like 10 minutes, it's just I think 5 or 6. So it's a lot shorter. And then when they play it live, I don't remember who mentioned. I think in the beginning they were playing it pretty much like in the video, a shortened version. But lately they are playing also the outro. So usually the intro, the perinto thing is recorded like from a tape. And then when the actual song starts, they play the whole thing until the end nowadays.
Yeah, the only thing they're missing is the actual like cello outro. It stops when they just stop the song, and it's a bummer because that's one of my favorite parts. It's the actual outro.
I think it's violin, and I think it's Heathen from Korpiklani, who has done a bunch of stuff on. He's all over Verisäkeet, and I'm sure he's come back. And the singer from Korpiklani is on the newest album. That they seem to have a pretty good relationship.
Yeah, actually, when we were filming, we had to film some extra material after the main filming of the documentary, and the guys from Korpiklani were in the backstage. I mean, we met the singer in Nosturi. It's just, the connection is definitely there.
And they are constantly touring together anyway. I think they did like 4 or 5, I don't know, a lot.
It's a natural connection.
Their first US tour was opening for Korpiklani.
Last time I saw them in Bordeaux, it was also opening for Korpiklani.
Yes.
Yeah, which is an interesting mix, but I think it works well, But yeah, that outro is gorgeous. I think I have a little pet peeve about it, which is, one, it's too short. I want that section to go on longer. Every time, right when I'm getting into it, it fades out. I
agree completely. When I was listening to the song in my car to prepare the episode, first time I listened to it entirely, and right at the end I was just playing it back just to have the beginning at 8 minutes when the drums come in and you have this guitar. The part is really strange. It's like I'm not a guitarist, but and it's so good with the scream just at the beginning before the guitar parts kicks in. I want it to last for like hours.
I know,
but it's
monumental.
not.
It's such a shame. They could continue doing something like that for 5 minutes and it would be just the best song ever.
I know. Once that outro starts, it could just keep building and going forever. The other thing is, I think that melody in the outro is played on synths. It's not played on real. It's not. I don't think it is Heathen on the actual part. I think the synths fade out and then Heathen comes in, and that's why you can kind of hear it get like all the way quiet and then louder again.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's not like, oh, here's this instrument and everything else drops out. It's kind of like everything gets quiet and then the violin part comes a little bit louder again.
And it could have the tape playing that part like at the end of the song live instead of just fading it out and then that's it. I mean, you have a perfect opportunity to let the violin go and keep the atmosphere going.
They're against that.
Yeah, I know, but still.
I respect that. And I'm sure Marco likes that because he doesn't have to play to a click or something like that. Like he can make it a little bit more natural. But yeah, I think what I was gonna say is the violin part at the end, I made the mistake of making that my ringtone for a few years on my phone. Now every time I hear it, I think I'm getting a phone call. And like it doesn't, I know I put the song on, but as soon as I hear it, my brain goes, oh, right.
Can I ask to the experts how frequent this song is on the Moonsorrow set list? I mean, despite these special tours they did with Verisäkeet, how often they play this on the
only one time when I saw it, which was the first show.
Okay.
It's been a long time since they played it before the Verisäkeet shows.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw it once for sure, maybe twice, but I'm not sure. Certainly not many times. Once at least for sure. And Henry was playing guitar that day, by the way. Janne wasn't there for some reason.
Boy.
Yeah.
They played it, I don't remember, because it's been like 10 years since I saw them live, because they don't come here anymore unless it's on a boat. I must have heard it live. I think I've heard it live. Anyway, like songwriting wise, one of the things that really works for this song is it has lots of little in-between sections. So instead of just going from like the intro to the verse or from the verse to the chorus or whatever, there's always like a couple bars of or like little synth parts or like a little in-between part to build a little bit of anticipation and then going into that. I think it works really well.
I wanted to ask you, because earlier you started saying that it avoids cliches, and I wanted to hear more, because then something happened and you were interrupted.
Well, I mean, I interrupted just because I never stop talking doesn't mean you guys are interrupting. Well, I think, it's not that there's like any like huge cliches around like epic metal songs, but I think the thing that how do I say this without being mean? I'm mean about Moonsorrow songs all the time. Why shouldn't I be mean about Korpiklani? I loved Korpiklani. Korpiklani was one of my favorite bands when I was in high school. And there's still some stuff that I like. There's some of the early stuff that I like, but I feel like a lot of the songs just follow a very predictable formula now. And you can kind of guess what a Korpiklani song will sound like. And if I had to guess, one of the things that makes something like Pakanayula sound, I don't know, get old more easily is that it kind of has a little bit more of like a cliche, like sound and structure and whatever. And Jumalten Kaupunki is so catchy and appealing, but it's really hard to point to any other song or any other Moonsorrow song that's like, oh, right, it's just this thing again. Like they never really did anything like it, and they never really did anything like it again.
I think that without being judgmental, it is definitely a good moment to open a little bit of the discussion. That it's honestly one of the discussions that the documentary opens here. Jumalten Kaupunki is an explosive song, but in terms of, I think that we can definitely talk a little bit about, if everyone agrees about, again, without being judgmental, because I think that we can use, anyone can use the labels that everyone, I mean, it's like, I've been into journalism for years, and I discovered that there's no wrong or right when you need to evaluate something. Whatever you want to call it is the way that you should call it. But I think that Jumalten Kaupunki is the best representation of what we can call folk metal for most of the people. Definitely folk as a denomination for Moonsorrow, folk metal, is problematic. I mean, it's not my appreciation, it's something that they try to escape from because of what the movement represents. And there is always consideration, not because you are true or you are more experienced or anything, but you can call it more cliche, you can call it more, predictable, whatever you want, but the folk metal formula, it's something that people associate really easy to Kivenkantaja and the previous albums, but especially to Kivenkantaja. Like, this is a perfect folk metal album. And if you research on the reviews about Kivenkantaja on internet, folk metal is a recurrent word. It's like everyone goes back to that word. But the problem is, not the problem, but what happens with this folk metal denomination. And I think that, as a discussion, we do have on this particular conversation people from completely different denominations. So we definitely all have a different perception of what folk metal is. And we can definitely discuss a little bit how positive, negative, relevant or irrelevant the folk metal label is over this album in particular. And if we want, I think that we can always discuss if Moonsorrow should be considered a folk metal band. But it's a little bit, I think, that the elephant in the room, and that's one of the conflicts in the script of the documentary, this folk metal thing, because you can see a completely different reaction depending on who you are talking to. So
it's interesting that you say that Kivenkantaja is like the ultimate folk metal album. And I know after they did this, they moved to a totally different sound. They're like, we're going much more black metal. But it sounds to me like this album is intentionally trying to either move past folk metal or take folk metal somewhere else. Because I was thinking about this as I was listening to it again recently, and I was remembering what someone said about a friend of theirs, a girlfriend, listening to it and saying it sounded futuristic, or a friend. Yeah. And there's a lot of like synth stuff going on, and not just like, oh, we couldn't afford violins, so we got fake violins. There's a lot of like progressive elements, a lot of, like Pink Floyd and King Crimson and stuff like that starting to come in. So it already kind of feels like they are, it's kind of like the opposite of folk music, right? Like folk music is...
But still, if we put it on context, we have to recognize that most of the people, it's not that they overlook these details, but definitely Kivenkantaja is a folk metal album.
Well, and so that's what's interesting to me about it, right?
Because like, it's not accurate in terms of what the band wants to show. I mean, obviously, it's out of the discussion that Moonsorrow doesn't want that, But if we look at the metal panorama in the way or how journalism work on this, or how people, sell the image of Moonsorrow, transmit the legacy of Moonsorrow from mouth to mouth, I do think that the folk metal as a component is really important on this album. If you are talking about folk metal, oh man, you need to listen to that Moonsorrow album, the Kivenkantaja thing is fucking amazing. It's like best fucking folk metal album ever. And the point is like, why is it so important for everyone to, because it has an implication. That's my point. When you talk about folk metal, you're instantly talking about Korpiklani, you're talking about Ensiferum, you're talking about a lot of things that don't necessarily
sound similar to each other.
They don't portray the same feeling that Kivenkantaja is portraying. It's more complex. Kivenkantaja doesn't go to that thing, Again, I don't want to be judgmental on this. I don't want to say folk metal is this and that. I do respect. When I was younger, I was listening to all these bands. But the point is, like, still, Moonsorrow, I have the feeling that even if Moonsorrow wants to make justice to this album, they don't need to, because this album, it is where it is, but they will never be able to take Kivenkantaja from this whole folk metal greatest hits. And that's kind of sad, because it's like the band couldn't control the destiny of their own album in terms of what this album means in the history of metal. The environment took the album to a place where they are like, yeah, but it's not really that.
Well, that always happens. The moment any band
puts
an album, or any writer puts a book or a movie, whatever, the moment it gets to the public, anything can happen.
Exactly.
Associations, whatever.
I think you're both right, Sasan and Leo. The album lies in a particular spot because it's mainly considered as a folk metal classic. But as you said, there is these little elements more progressive that make the album a very good album. And it's like if we had to make gradings for folk metal stuff, it will be S tier, like top tier, the final boss, because it's in the genre. It helped describe the folk metal style, but also it's a bit more than that, probably. And you said earlier, Leo, it aged the song Matkan Lopussa, and probably the album as well aged very well, probably because of that, because it's now so much a classic for a musical style that it will never age.
It's a classic.
I don't know how to finish my sentence.
It's a classic for a musical style, but it also isn't fully a part of that musical style, which is, I think, when that musical style gets old, or a million bands have done it, like, you're not sick of this specific thing yet, which is interesting. I don't know if you guys are hearing airplanes, but now that window is closed.
The question is more like, for all of you as fans of Moonsorrow, unconditional fans of Moonsorrow, I will put it right, is it a thing? Is it a problem? It is good? It is relevant at all that this album may be considered folk metal? Is it something that anyone here considers like, are you fucking kidding me? No, of course not. Or is something like, you just don't care because Kivenkantaja is Kivenkantaja?
I think that if you are trying to describe this album to someone who is not that familiar with metal in general, but they might be familiar with what folk is, I think it's a fair description to kind of give them an idea what it is, because the album does have lots of folk influences with like traditional instruments and such. I think since it has a lot of like folk influences, I think it's justified to kind of label it under that. But as a whole, it's a bit of on the border whether it should be necessarily called folk metal.
Can I ask you, Aleksi, how is your relation with the denomination of folk metal as a Finnish person? Is it something like,
could you be more specific?
If you consider your history in metal as you grew up, folk metal has a lot of Scandinavian components, and it has a clear evolution. So the point is, are you comfortable with the evolution of folk metal since the moment it started until what it became today? Like, is it a solid gender for you? Or?
Yeah, I do enjoy it quite thoroughly. There has been different like influences, like especially since when we compare what was 20 years ago to what is now. Of course, like so much more influences from all around the world has taken part of it. And many bands have kind of lost their own spark, but rather have kind of given up on finding their own way and just seeing what someone else succeeds in and tries to take as much from it without sounding the same, for example. But we've been talking a lot about Korpiklani, for example, and I think they are doing extremely good job with staying true for what they are doing, especially like the newest albums. I'm not that big of a fan of the newer albums, but I have to give them respect for it, what they've done. They've taken it to more like this. They have now more even like this Finnish Schlager vibes to it. So
exactly,
but it's really nice to see that they are still keeping it their own thing, and they are not following others. Like they are a role model for many. But I do wish that many people would seek like the role models in themselves as well.
I have a couple thoughts on this, and maybe like a different way of framing the question. But my first thought on it is there's folk instruments in the album, but if I'm talking about this album to somebody that doesn't listen to metal, doesn't know folk metal as a genre, this isn't the album I would show them if I was trying to introduce them to folk metal, like as a concept. And I also don't think like Raunioilla or Jumalten Kaupunki or, I think the most folky sounding song on it is Kivenkantaja, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I think it uses folk instruments, but I don't think that's all that uncommon when you consider a lot of it's like synth and stuff. I would compare it more to, I don't know, like the Final Countdown. I think Jumalten Kaupunki has more in common with the Final Countdown than it does with traditional folk music,
That's why I love it.
But I think genre is a really tricky thing, especially in metal. And it's really clear that Moonsorrow has actively avoided being considered in a particular genre. They didn't want to be called folk metal. They really adamantly didn't want to be called black metal. And, they made up their own little genre or whatever, but I think it was mainly just so people stop asking. And I think metal journalism and metal culture is really into categorizing bands into smaller and smaller categories. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think that comes down to subcultures and subgroups. There's so few of us in the world. It's kind of weird to say that because there's thousands and thousands. But when you consider like fans of any other genre, there's definitely, not that many people that listen to like extreme metal. And I think maybe the labels and the subcategories of subcategories just makes it easier for people to find each other, find groups, find shows, find bands and stuff like that. But what it makes me think of, and what I kind of want your guys' opinion on, I saw this post on Facebook. Somebody just posted this article, and it was this study that said metal fans are the most loyal fans in all of music. And so they did some study about how loyal fans of certain genres are. And they're like, of all of them, metalheads are the most loyal. And, the comments were a bunch of metalheads feeling proud of themselves. But I was like, what's that actually mean?
Exactly.
Like,
that was my question. What is
right.
loyal?
So I read the study, and what the study actually says, and maybe they used the word loyal, but what they actually were measuring is which genre of music has its listeners listen to the fewest other genres of music. So for example, with I don't know, lounge music. Like nobody just listens to lounge music. It had the least loyal listeners. Or like when it came to like trip hop, people listen to trip hop and other things, right? But metalheads by far were the least likely to listen to anything other than metal.
So loyal means narrow-minded.
Yeah, so I don't know. I wonder how you guys feel about this, because in Europe you can have a community of other people that listen to this stuff. You can go to a festival, you can whatever. If I only wanted to listen to, you know, the metal bands we like, I would never have anyone to talk to music about.
I think that it's a really interesting point what you say, because, for example, if we connect this with the folk metal thing, I mean, the reason I was so interested about this is because definitely the folk metal movement or the folk metal era or whatever you want to call it, it got a component, or a commercial component. There was a lot of interests behind promoting these folk metal culture bands wherever, especially on the big festivals. If we talk about Bakken, Hellfest, suddenly everyone had a horn. From one day to another, everyone was a fucking Viking. So there was an intentional, again, an interest. There was money moving. There was, at the end of the day, really connects with what you say. It was a reduction of what folk music means, because the concept of what folk music is, first of all, is so fucking wide. I mean, how can you cover the whole denomination of folk metal in Scandinavia if every Scandinavian country has different instruments, approaches, etc.? So now take folk to an international panorama, you just go crazy. What is folk music? It's immense, you know? So what is really folk metal? Is it really metal taking a realistic view on those cultures to represent something else, or it's a bunch of many bands that took those melodies and repeated the same fucking shit over and over and over again with the same flutes, with the same violin, with the same whatever. So we have a folk metal album. And I think that approach is pretty much the approach that Henry, or the view that Henry has, because Henry expressed himself at this fucking reduction of this is fucking sloping metal or something. You know, well,
I can give you a really good example of that happening in the US right now. Every US radio station is owned by two companies, and they all put the same shit on all the time. And they're the ones signing the bands, and they know what the lowest risk kind of music is. Song length, like lowest risk of like the listener changing the channel. They don't need you to love it. They just need you to not hate it enough to switch the station.
Even NPR?
And well, NPR is public.
Okay,
NPR is government run, but every like, it's all like iHeartRadio and other shit.
It's the only US radio I know, so that's.
Oh, sorry. Well, you wouldn't know like a local whatever, right?
Okay.
But the idea is that the genre is just instruments now, because the songs aren't different. Like a country song from the 70s and a rock song from the 70s sound really different. But a country song today and a rock song today are the same song, except the country song has some light banjo in the background and it has maybe a little bit of violin. But you could write the exact song and the label will then decide, okay, do we want to give it to this country band, or do we want to give it to this rock band, or do we want to give it to this pop singer? Like, genre has become irrelevant in the US popular music today because they're all using the same kind of drums. They're all using the same like fake instrument, not that like fake like it's bad, right? But it's all digital recording, digital background instruments. And even the rock bands are using fake drums that don't sound real, and they all have stuff. So the difference between the genres now is just, do you have a banjo? You are country. Do you have mainly guitar? You are rock. And a lot of the folk metal bands are just Iron Maiden, but you have
no one stood up to make the difference on that, and that's the big problem. It's more like a circular walk. But again, I don't want to be judgmental with anyone, but maybe someone loves 5 different folk metal bands and they will come to me and say, no, it's completely different if you listen to this, that, whatever. But the point is, like, my problem or my question here is it really, after, let's say, you listen to a classic folk metal album, is it really appealing to you or inviting you to discover what's behind the metal component? Maybe not. Maybe everything is it's made in such a perfect and efficient way that you already have whatever folk thing you need to have there in that album, but you don't need to go further. And maybe that was the problem of folk metal as a movement, especially from 2000, I would say 6 ahead until 5 years ago. It was pretty much like a really straightforward path with a beginning, with an end, but who made the difference on that gender,
As an example, just before the recording, I was at the bar with a French Alexis and a friend who she doesn't know Moonsorrow, so we were explaining to her what we were doing and the band, and we never said folk metal because she would have not know the concept.
Yeah.
So we said black metal because I usually say black metal from Moonsorrow, and adding in the conversation, they use some folk elements and they have an epic vibe, and that was all. And she was not confused. Probably if we had said like, it's a mix between that and that and that, but it's mainly folk metal, too much category, it would have been pretty difficult for her to figure out what the band is. But with black metal, it was kind of fast-paced guitars and screams, and she had an idea. Probably not the best one, but at least she had one. So.
Well, I'm surprised that you say all of this, because it depends. If the person knows something about metal, then that's fine. But for example, I think of my mom. I tell her folk metal, well, she knows what metal is, noisy guitars, and she knows what folk is, so she can easily make the mixture in her head. Okay, so noisy guitars with violins and tambourines. She could understand this. But if I tell her black metal, she's like, what metal? What is the difference between black metal and any other color metal?
It's funny. It's funny if you put it that way, because if you say that for someone who is out of metal, it looks that way. But if you are inside metal, I think that folk metal is more closed as a concept than black metal. I mean, I would say the black metal component of Moonsorrow is there because actually black metal has so many fucking ways to express itself as a gender that Moonsorrow has a lot of black metal. Moonsorrow is not a black metal band, but there are obviously Moonsorrow is doing black metal in certain stages. But if you put it on the folk metal thing, that's the dangerous part for me, because it's like, which are the possibilities inside of folk metal? Moonsorrow is over the possibilities of folk metal.
But I have 2 thoughts. The first is, and it's something that we'll talk about a little bit more, but we, like, for example, at the start of Raunioilla, I was talking about the time signature of the intro being in 5. Yeah. And a lot of Finnish folk music in particular is in that time signature. That's something that you don't really hear that often in folk metal. Like, it's not actually what folk music sounded like turned into metal. Maybe Korpiklani is closer, but when you listen to Encepharum, it's, like Metallica with synths. Like, it's not, none of the melodies are folk melodies or
just epic music into a metal context.
But what's interesting is that Moonsorrow kind of does do the folk thing when they do folk metal, especially on this album. I think it is kind of mixing the sort of bigger, more classical composition heavy stuff, which I think of as being kind of the opposite of folk music, but mixes in with a lot of like rhythms and instrumentation, the way those instruments would be played from folk music, which I think is interesting.
And it serves a purpose. When they introduce something, it serves a purpose in the narrative of the album.
But what you're saying also makes me think of so the Bay Area where I live in the 80s had a famous and big thrash metal scene. And when I was growing up, it had been like enough time. This is like the mid 2000s, where it was like 20 years later, and now it was like coming back. So every metalhead in high school had a thrash metal band. And you'd go to these shows and there'd be like 6 thrash bands, but they were all kind of like this thrash revival, like sounding like Exodus, sounding like Testament, sounding like these like Bay Area bands. And that kind of came and went. And none of those bands, they were good, they were talented. There's a couple of those bands still kicking. None of them sound, they have maybe a little bit more death metal mixed in, a little bit more other elements. But what makes me think about how that genre just kind of came and went is that it was based around playing an older kind of music. So the borders are already drawn. Like you can't step outside these borders because that's not what it was like in the 80s thrash songs. And maybe folk metal came and went for the same reasons, where
but
like,
it has a different context. I mean, maybe it's just my view on this because I wasn't there, but of course, I've read books about the whole movement, and what happened in that moment, it really feels like there was a subculture associated to it. The do-it-yourself is like the hardcore movement in New York City. There was something else. It was intentional. There was like a reason. There was an aesthetic. There was a lot of things that people took the decision by themselves to create that, even if they were replicating the same thing. But the folk metal thing, it was constructed. It was, I wouldn't say it was imposed, but it was trendy. It's like you didn't really did the effort that those people did in the States to make the concerts, and like maybe you had to ask your cousin for the fucking bass because you didn't have money for the guitar, etc. Like this folk metal thing, suddenly you from one day to another it exploded, and you arrive to the festival with the money you've been saving all year, and you go and you buy your bike and kit. So suddenly you are a Scandinavian guy listening to Lucifer. So it's a different context. That's the point. At least the perception I have in terms of the folk metal thing. It's just, it doesn't feel that it had the subculture associated to it in terms of, I'm not saying it's not valid. Of course, every music is valid. It contributed to the metal history. It deserves a place, but it is a different context. And that's why Moonsorrow, for what Moonsorrow did on these albums, and what Moonsorrow represents, the story behind Moonsorrow, the influences they had, the history of how Henry and Ville grew up, tape trading and all this stuff, it doesn't really match with this folk metal environmental representation, at least for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. So you've been talking about like a couple things now in the last 10 minutes. So my first was like the folk metal as like how it's defined. And that's, of course, like there is no general definition. I think everybody can interpret as they want. And to me, at least, I mean, I think Sasan said that it sounds different where it's coming from. And I think that's the part of it. Like it is to kind of say, if you're from Hungary or you're from Russia, you want to include something native to it. And that makes it kind of folk metal in that sense. Like it has this traditional feeling to it or traditional sound. But then folk metal in general as a term is a bit loose, and it is. So I think that's my idea of folk metal, which is somewhat like why I would be okay with calling, say, this Kivenkantaja folk metal. But on the other hand, I'm not too big fan of like labeling, classifying genres. Since nowadays, especially like genres, they get mixed. So you don't want to like make something progressive, technical, brutal, slamming death metal. It makes no sense. Like, yet some bands do this stuff. So,
well, just a little parenthesis. One thing is labeling, another thing is describing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think like when it comes to like Moonsorrow, I've heard many people talk about like pagan black metal or whatever.
Exactly.
Which is even wider.
Yeah, like what do you include in that?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Well, in that context, I think pagan would be the best description what it is in terms like when it comes to lyrics and stuff like this.
What's also interesting. Oh, sorry. I want you to finish that point. But the word pagan, the meaning of the word pagan isn't even describing what something is. It's describing what something isn't.
Isn't, yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yes. Pagan means you're not Christian or whatever, like mainstream Abrahamic religion, right? But it doesn't tell you exactly what that thing actually is. So that I think also works in the context
because
of music.
By definition, Moonsorrow is a really we are not that band for everything. It's like it's like what is Moonsorrow?
Yeah. What else did you want to say, Alexi?
Good question. I think like when we are talking about Moonsorrow, we can of course agree on that they have this like, I'm not going to now use the word folk, but rather traditional elements when it comes to Finnish music, right? And they have lots of these harsher elements that are mainly in black metal. And the combination of those, of course, you cannot use the word traditional black metal because that is completely different thing again. Mm. So in my opinion, you don't have to label it anything, but we use labeling to describe it maybe to others or make it more clear to yourself or kind of to make yourself feel part of something when you can label it.
And it's a big part of marketing too, which obviously. That sounds bad. And, I don't like anything to do with marketing, but, like labels have to try to promote these bands. I recorded a demo and I tried to find a couple labels to send it to. And they were like, describe your band. And I was like, I don't
music.
Like, what do you can listen to it, but I can tell you what bands I like, but I don't know like how to, but I think it helps to be like, we are a proto slam grind synth band, like,
but you can just, because, for example, generally fast paced, high pitched guitars, guttural vocals, or slow passages. You can describe it more like this rather than.
Sure. And that's what I kind of ended up having to do, but it's okay because nobody's going to listen to my shit.
That's why you just always label it as for fans of.
Yeah, I guess
exactly.
But for me, this is exactly why I describe it as pagan metal instead of folk metal, because I think that the boundaries of folk metal are quite finite, where pagan metal is infinite. Because you have, like I said, when I was interviewed in the UK when Moonsorrow was playing there, where Leo and I met, and Abel was there as well, and we had a great time. And you weren't there, no, but we filmed something for the documentary there as well. And that I talked about, for example, folk metal is basically just heroic speed metal with Manowar-esque lyrics. And then for some reason, they want to include a flute or a violin, where pagan metal or whatever is mostly black metal with infinite elements that you can choose to add to it. It's basically that. And mainstream folk metal is always in English. It's never, with the exception of Heathen, which sing in Dutch. Otherwise, it's always in English. Whereas pagan metal, like Arcona and Moonsorrow and whatever else, is always in mother tongue. And for example, Fintroll, I would never call Fintroll folk metal either, because it's always going more and more black metal, and they keep it in Swedish. Maybe I would say Monogam, for example, from Sweden, they sing in Swedish. But they also started as a complete black metal band with violins, and you wouldn't call that folk metal as well, because even though they have quite a lot of folk metal or folky instruments or whatever, which is basically only flutes and violin, they always have this black metal bass line, because in, for example, Ensiferum, I wouldn't say there's a single bass beat, but in all the other bands, there's bass beats all the time. And it's kind of says what it is, right? I mean, you don't really, how much like bass beat do you even have in Moonsorrow until Verisäkeet?
That is a really good transition to the point, something I just thought of, which maybe brings us back to Jumalta and Kaupunki a little bit, which is we all like black metal here, and this is Moonsorrow's least black metal album, and this is maybe their least black metal song, but we also all really like this song.
Yeah,
which
It
is
works.
yeah. Let me add one thing, because for the last half an hour we have been talking about folk metal and not about. Actually, I'm going to cut this and put it in a separate bonus podcast that I think will be awesome.
Oh,
This is
keep
like-
it. It'll go. People like little
Yeah.
detours.
We'll see. Anyway, this was great, and there were a couple of things I wanted to say. So especially, I thought of this when you, Sasan, mentioned that Ensiferum is usually called folk metal, but then it's just power metal with shrieking vocals and some violin sounding synthesizer. And what I consider to be one of the earliest folk metal albums is Nordavind by Storm. I don't know if you guys know it.
Yes,
It's,
that's an
Of course,
incredible
of
album.
course, it's a
Yeah.
classic.
with I think it was Satyr. Was it Satyr? Or
Yeah, the statue from some Satyricon
Satyricon?
and Fenris.
Fenris, yeah. And
But then
Right.
again, it's also a black metal background. It's not
well,
folk metal.
but actually, the reason I mentioned this album is that it's guitar, bass, and drums and vocals. So there is zero synthesizers, zero violin, zero accordions, zero any of that. But the melodies are, all of them, I think, if I'm not mistaken, all of them are folk melodies from Norwegian folk songs. So it is definitely metal because it's distorted guitars and things like this. And it's definitely folk because they're covers of folk songs. And you don't need any single accordion or accordion sounding plugin or anything like that.
That is
So-
true. Absolutely.
Hey, hey,
It's like the two opposite ways of looking at something called folk metal, either metal with folk instruments but not sounding anything like folk music melodies, or folk melodies using metal instruments.
The problem for me is when folk metal doesn't serve the purpose that Aleksi mentioned. I mean, if you use folk metal as a help of defining something else, that's great. But the problem is how many situations I had when I was, especially when I was working in London, and I was telling people, yeah, I'm doing a documentary on the side about what? About Moonsorrow. And I had a lot of reactions like, oh, they do the folk metal thing, right? And I was like, man, they are a fucking great band. Yeah, but they do folk metal, right? No, yeah, I'm not into folk metal. And I had a lot of reactions. And I was like, fuck you, like you just don't discard Moonsorrow, the pleasure of listening to an album of Moonsorrow just because you think it's simply folk metal. I mean, it's okay for you if you have a problem with folk metal, but that's when I think that folk metal can be also dangerous. Every gender, every label can be like that. But, I faced those situations where people took importance out of what Moonsorrow does just because they're folk metal.
Once, the first time that I met Henry in person, I gave him a demo of a band who are friends of mine called Milef, and he said, what is this? And then I told him it's folk metal. And he started like, oh, well, but folk metal, I'm not so eager. Like he started like this, and Ville said, but we are folk metal as well. So yeah, you can see that even two people in the same band, the two founding members, can have a different idea of what folk metal is. Well, I understand that it's what Leo just described. Certain people, you tell them folk metal and they think of Corpiclania Ciferum and nothing else than that. And with this wearing fur and with the knacks in the hand.
I mean, we're not here to judge if that's right or wrong. Of course, it's a very close-minded, narrow-minded view, but it is happening. It is part of the reality metal.
Yeah.
And you're talking about, like they're holding axes and wearing fur, but the promotional material for this album had that.
Yeah,
they have chainmail, they have swords.
Yeah, and that is why. Yeah, this is another reason why they in Verisäkeet they are in the mud and covered in mud.
I don't see any fur.
Okay, all right, no fur.
It's the previous album.
Chainmail.
Just chainmail and a nose ring.
Yeah,
one of the chains got loose.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of thing. And when it was 2003, and suddenly there was the explosion of everybody doing that. So comes 2005 and they say we are not okay. We did it. It wasn't so common, but suddenly in the last 2 years, everybody else did it. We are not going to do it again. Yeah. So it made sense in that moment, I think.
But we should stick to we should stick to the followings: heavy, death, black, doom, thrash. and nothing else.
Actually, and everything else is a description rather than a label.
You have 5 genres. That's all.
Because even progressive can be progressive death, progressive black, progressive heavy, progressive power.
It's death or black.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, like, I would describe progressive as one of the least useful terms in music.
Almost like pagan.
Right. Well, it's just like I consider Moonsorrow progressive because they have non-traditional song structures. They have different time signatures that they use and whatever. But if you tell someone a band is progressive, ironically, the whole point of progressive is, again, like pagan, what it's not. But if you tell someone something is progressive, they imagine what it is, and they're like, oh, so it's like Dream Theater. And it's like, nope. It's like,
I was thinking of Dream Theater as well.
So there's like a progressive guitar tone. Like, what? Isn't that the opposite of the, like, as soon as it's defined by one thing, isn't it not progressive anymore? But it's one of those.
Well, I would say progressive is what starts somewhere and then completely somewhere else. Either that or ends in the same place, but in between went everywhere else. So the moment you have a verse, chorus, that is not progressive anymore. But if you have totally different parts, different time signatures, and it doesn't even have to be super strange. It doesn't have to be hard to tap a rhythm to. It doesn't have to be ultra complicated. It just has to have different parts, and I think that's enough for it to be progressive. It doesn't have to have this 13 on 16. You know, like what is this horrible band? Well, lots of people like it, but
Meshuggah. Yeah, I know.
You.
Yeah,
that's
a lot.
I
Disgusting.
Think that no one listening to Moonsorrow is really, at least on my mind, anyone who listens to Moonsorrow the first time, the 15th time, or if you're a fan, I think that it's completely unnecessary, and no one is trying to frame Moonsorrow into anything. I mean, as long as you spend 10 minutes with Moonsorrow, you know that Moonsorrow is different from anything else, and you just don't need the labeling.
It's not really framing. As a description, I think progressive, I mean, Moonsorrow is progressive because of what progressive means, at least as I understand progressive, which is what I just described. It fits in practically every song, maybe not. Yeah, even the demos, everywhere this fits.
I agree, but it's something that like I'm working on music that has progressive elements, but I feel like when you tell someone that it's progressive, they have a very different image in mind. And I think the folk metal thing is really tied into that. Like, yeah, it's folk. It has folk melodies and folk rhythms and folk influence, but is it what you are going to think of when I say folk music? Like, probably not. Like folk metal, probably not.
By definition of progressive, Moonsorrow is progressive, but the problem is like what each of these labors, they are so instilled that like people have a very difficult time to see what the words actually mean, and because they have an idea what they are connected to, say in music. If you hear progressive metal, you are thinking of Dream Theater. You're not thinking what the word progressive means. That's the problem here.
Yeah, you should rather say it's like Jethro Tull. It's progressive.
Yeah, I was about to say
progressive
more like
folk music. What the hell?
King Crimson or Opeth or whatever Michael Ackerfeld is doing. Maybe right now that's a representation of metal for most of the people what prog means.
Well, and it's, you know, in other genres we don't think of the words literally. It's just a word, like black metal, right?
Well, exactly. That's a difference between label and description in my head.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point.
So, and to bring back from folk metal to Jumalten Kaupunki, I will go back to the comment that started this whole separate conversation, which was Leo saying that this song is the most folk metal song in the album, which
brings the folk
for me it's absolutely the opposite. For me it's the least one, because take any of the others, for me Jumalten Kaupunki, as much as I love it, and I mean this is nothing bad, for me it's a totally power metal song.
Totally.
Yeah. So it's
symphonic, if you, I don't know how you want it, epic, whatever.
The least folk of all of them. As one of you guys said, it's more Final Countdown than anything folk.
Totally.
So yeah, it's interesting how you mentioned this particular one. And now Alexis, please tell us what the lyrics talk about.
I think it's about like Ragnarök and stuff like this, especially because there is this line, jossain kaukaisuudessa pronssitorvi soi, which is like somewhere in the distance a bronze horn is played, and that's basically, I think, a reference to Heimdallr playing Kjallarhorn. So I think, and that's like the sign of that Ragnarök is coming. I think that's a reference to that, and it would in a way make sense to other lyrics here. Now there's like lots of storms and everything going on, and it's been 1,000 years then they've been kind of wandering, and now they've finally come to this valley, which is just ever so gorgeous, and where's the hall of the gods. So they would have like wandered on to further in Asgard to Valhalla. This is kind of like my idea of this song. And in the end, since now Ragnarok has come, now the hall has just shattered. The Valhalla has kind of is gone in a way, or like the House of Gods is gone. This is kind of my idea of this song.
Two things on that real quick. I realized that, you were talking about the bronze horn being a reference to Ragnarok, and I was like, yes, that makes sense. And I realized it's not because I've read anything, it's just because I know the lyrics to Amon Amarth and Soon the World Will Cease to Be. And that's everything I know about Ragnarok is the lyrics in that. And Heimdall blows his horn. Yeah, that happens for sure. But what I wonder, like, to what degree the 1,000 years has the metaphor of, like the end of the pagan era. But it also is a little bit confusing, right? Because it sounds a little bit like coming. Maybe you could start to see it as the loss of that pagan culture, but now starting to like reawaken that. But it also, you're saying in the end, the city of the gods is lost. So it doesn't really sound like,
I mean, don't forget that the purpose behind the video, for what Vila says, it was representing a battle between Crusaders and Vikings. Of course, the purpose of the video is you need to be reductionist in the video because you cannot. They didn't have the back. I think that they had 1,000. How much they had? Yeah, 1,000 finish marks for doing the video. Of course, you cannot do a fucking great video about gods and stuff.
Yeah, but that's the thing. You could easily reflect Ragnarok into Crusades because it like kind of describes an end as well, both of them. So,
honestly, reading the translation, there is the horn mentioned, but everything else sounds like beautiful rivers, beautiful valleys. I don't see any distraction there.
Ton 10 tin. Editing in.
I spoke with Billy about this, and he told me that he just wrote the story himself, and it has no relation to Ragnarok or any mythological stories. There might be an influence, but it's just a story he wrote. So yeah, there is that. However, well, it was a good guess, and it's always fun to talk about Viking mythology.
Tin 10 ton. Editing done.
And honestly, I would believe that the reason why they made this kind of video for this kind of song, so there would be probably two reasons. One being that the song is very epic, very uplifting, and well, easily makes you think of battles, because of how the music sounds. And secondly, because maybe we have this one video. Our music, our album so far deal a lot with pre-Christian and this kind of thing. So we need battles or something epic, and we need something pre-Christian. So what do? I don't think it is so related to the lyrics of the song or the topic of the song.
Or maybe just the songs works in multiple levels. I mean, it's an open reading from an epic point of view, but also can be applied to a more mundane point of view. That's also a chance.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I feel like there is some subtext, and we'll get into Verisäkeet next album, but I don't think like Jotunheim is just about a mountain. I think there is some. I think with this pre-Christian like theme, I think even when the lyrics are just talking happily and positively about something, I think it has that sort of context of that thing having been lost. And maybe I do buy that the horns are kind of pointing to that underlying loss of end of that culture, time, place.
Maybe it's just me, but every time I listen to the song, it reminds me like, a battle breaking up, but in these two different levels. It's like you can see in the lower level, the humans going to battle, the bleeding, dying in the battleground. And on the higher level, you can see at the same time all these keyboards and melodies on the background. It's like, it's so many things happening in the song that it really, for at least for me, represents like a big picture, big panorama of many things happening at the same time that involves the divine and also, the human connection. So I think it works at least for me, works in different levels.
The narration at the beginning, is that Ville?
Very good question. Is that, maybe that is?
Oh, I thought you were about to. You were about to answer it.
No,
I'm sorry to say this, but it really puts me off, the narration at the beginning.
Yeah,
it's
agree.
not well resolved. I get the point, but it's not well resolved.
And it's not even on Tulomirsky. It works great, but here it sounds like someone trying to make their voice sound deeper.
Yeah, maybe if you just change the voice, that's okay. I think that the narration is okay, but
maybe I wouldn't be surprised if it was Mikkel.
Yeah, he has a low voice.
Yeah.
He
likes making this, but I don't really know.
I'm sorry, but I like the intro with the voice.
Yeah, I agree. It's not too long. It's not.
I like the idea. That's the point.
It's so cheap.
I don't have an opinion on it.
I like it as well.
Compromise.
Yeah.
But Thomas, doesn't that also remind you of Balsagov as well, like the
course,
intro?
Of course.
Like
it's
all
so
the
much
speeches there.
I was trying to explain Balsagot to a friend. So I just put the album and it was probably one of the most painful experience he ever had. And I was just next to him like, but it's great. The singing is not good. The guitars are so screaming. The keyboards is out there, but it's great. Yeah, it's great. And no, yeah, there is this kind of cheap. No, cheap is not a good. Let's say old school.
Yeah.
It's in this voice in the intro there is this kind of you want to do something but you don't have the time or the resources or like in the 90s for all those black metal bands that they were basically using their parents' money to make tapes or something. So it has I have the French word again but not the English one.
What's the French word?
Avoir du cachet, to
have cachet, no?
When something has value, even if it's cheap, like
sure. Kitsch.
There is a signature or each, yeah. And I really enjoy the intro for that because it reminds me of watching Conan or stuff like that.
Let's put it this way. If we consider the resources that Moonsorrow had in the studio, I don't know specifically the resources, but let's consider that if you look at the album and the production of the album, everyone who has a little bit of knowledge about music here, we all recognize that you can do a million things with the voices.
Yeah,
you can just switch and play a little bit to make it look perfect. So, but this in particular, I think that the problem, maybe if there's a problem, it's exactly what Abel says. It's a little bit like forced, like they're really trying to be mega epic, and it's that's what it's not really working for me.
Or they were really trying to impersonate Balsagot.
I wouldn't be surprised either, because these little pieces from other bands here and there, and homages and things like this. We will see in Carhunkins there are at least 2.
It's kind of funny because on the title song of the second Balsagot album, the intro it's not the same, but it's built the same way. So you have Byron, the singer, talking over very melancholic stuff. The Rio is dying, he's bleeding on the ice, he's just going to froze to death in a minute, and you have this progression of chords really really dramatic, and Byron taking a big voice and my blood on the ice stuff, and it's similar.
Yeah, they couldn't afford Christopher Lee. Yeah, that's before he became a metalhead.
That would have been amazing.
Yeah.
So I think, like, to me, this song has like one of my favorite choruses that Moonsorrow has. It's this really epic, and I don't know, I can just it's quite literally what the lyrics even are. but combining the epicness to the lyrics, like I can just imagine that being my soundtrack whenever I would walk on a hill, and then there's this extremely gorgeous valley ahead of me. This is something I could imagine to be my soundtrack to that.
Yeah, and I think in a previous maybe on the Voimasta album, I was talking about a choir part that I thought like didn't have a lot of energy, and I was like, I think it's because the notes go down at the end, but I don't know what I'm talking about, because in Jumalt and Kaupunki the notes do the same thing, right? It's like da na 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 na, and so, but it doesn't kind of feel like it's losing that energy. It doesn't feel like it's building to like a big shout or anything, but it feels very like strong, and like you're like you're projecting a lot of strength. You're not like fully exerting yourself in the moment, but you just feel strong listening to it. It's great. It's really, really well done.
You know, what this whole story of finding a valley after a long time of search, what it makes me think of is this cartoon about dinosaurs. I think that original title is The Land Before Time.
Yeah,
fucking great movie.
Yeah.
My best movie ever, man.
Can you imagine them listening to this and being like, really, it reminds you of The Land Before Time?
I mean, the lyrics, because suddenly
That's
they find a
worse.
beautiful valley.
Mikkel is flipping shit right now.
And that was a movie. In Spanish, it's called In Search of the Enchanted Valley, or In Search for the Enchanted Valley, or something like this. So yeah, they're looking for a valley, and they find this valley, and they start the dinosaurs.
It's funny how uncultured our generation is, because when you started to say, they're searching for a valley, I thought you were going to talk about like Exodus and like searching for the land of the Hebrews and whatever. But no, you're like, remember Land Before Time?
Yeah, man. Totally. I thought that you were going to talk about the dope smoker of Sleep, but no, suddenly you just take that out of the hat. So
I was checking the name of the movie in French, and it's awful. It's like The Little Dinosaur and the Valley of Wonders.
Land Before Time is a pretty sick name. I don't know why you guys weren't happy with it.
I saw it.
No, you had to, not you, right? But someone was like, I don't know. We have to make it clear that it's about a dinosaur.
This is really interesting to see like how different people, like what comes to their mind when they are reading song lyrics, when they hear different things in music, what comes to their mind. It's really intriguing to find that out, since we all think so differently.
Especially when you're younger, because you've consumed so much less and you just jump to conclusions. But yeah, like when you see all of, I don't know, like web forums and stuff like that were big for me growing up. And yeah, all my favorite bands, people have these theories like, I think the song's about this, and you grow up and you're like, that has nothing to do. But there's no way with that incredibly obscure movie.
Especially with Moonsorrow, I think that Moonsorrow, over the years, you have so much room for yourself to make reinterpretations of things that you saw in the past, but maybe you grab the album a year after and you just see a completely different movie in your head.
I agree.
That's one of the Moonsorrow qualities that's super cool about it.
I agree completely, because I was reading the first time I read the lyrics in English with the valley and stuff, I instantly thought of this painting by Alan Lee for The Lord of the Rings, when they arrive to Rivendell. So you have this huge mossy valley with the castles of the elves and stuff. And I had no idea it could have any connection to Ragnarok. So thanks, Alexi, for the explanation. For me, it was just Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, same.
Which is, Moonsorrow is one of the kind of like, not exactly, they're not, that's the thing, they're not really a fantasy metal band. I was going to say they're one of the bands of that kind of sound, of that genre, that are the least into Lord of the Rings, at least.
I mean, it's not summoning. It's definitely not
right,
summoning.
it's not summoning, but it doesn't, even like all the black metal bands, we were saying this earlier, I think, before we started recording, like all the Norwegian bands of the 90s, like Burzum, Lord of the Rings reference.
Yeah.
Gorgoroth,
Lord of the Rings reference. I have a theory
Even
that Amon Amarth, I have a theory that Dark Throne is a Lord of the Rings reference. Because in the One Ring to Find Them poem, it's one ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to the land of Mordor where shadows lie, and blah blah blah. And it's like about the Dark Lord on his dark throne.
You have Isengard with Fenris.
And that's the other thing. His other band is called Isengard, and I was like, I see you. I know Dark Throne is a Lord of the Rings reference. I haven't seen that written anywhere, but you heard it here first. All of them are little dungeon nerds watching reading Lord of the Rings at the time. But Moonsorrow is not really into the whole. Maybe they like it, maybe they don't. I don't know. But it's not in really.
Definitely, I think that it's on the background, but probably for them, I don't know. It doesn't look like we try to make an interpretation of what they talk about for every song. But definitely, I think that they don't want to have a chain in terms of, they don't want to have a limitation.
Well, that's another interesting thing that I just realized. We were talking about how this genre exploded and got so big after this album came out. This album came out in 2003, the same year, maybe earlier than the last Lord of the Rings movie. Yep. And I feel like it could be that Lord of the Rings made the whole fantasy epic thing so popular that translated to these like bands wanting to kind of put that to metal.
There is an interview that I read with Emperor. Either Isan or Samut were saying that it was about in the Nightshade Eclipse, and the quote is something like, "We were greatly influenced by the Lord of the Rings. Of course, this was before you could buy a Lord of the Rings McBurger in McDonald's." So
yeah,
probably.
Exactly.
The movie came out in 2001, I think was the first, then 2 and
1,
3.
2, and 3,
Yeah, so, I mean, right when the 90s ended, pretty much.
I have another interview of Emperor on the reissue in the Nightshade Eclipse for 2014.
That one, yeah.
And they were touring with Balsagot. And actually, Balsagot, little brackets, Balsagot told the Emperor on tour that after the first album of Emperor, they decided to add more and more keyboards in Balsagot because it was cool. But the guys of Balsagot were already like 10 years older than Ishan and the rest. So Emperor influenced Moonsorrow in a way.
Listen, guys, this just came in. The spoken voice in the intro is Ville, pitched down a couple of semitones for maximum manliness.
There we go.
Is that Mr. Sorvali confirming?
Yes, it is.
Okay. See, it sounded like him, but not quite like him. It's interesting. He should have just had him talk normally and then pitch it down. But now he sounds strained and doesn't matter. Remake the album. Is what I'm trying to say. The only difference is that narration. Are we going to talk about Kivenkantaja?
Yes. Just let me finish something I would really like to say, that I consider this song to be, so what I understand by epic, because epic is an overused word, maybe not so much lately, but what I understand as epic is something that relates to either adventures or battles, or both. And doesn't have to be particularly big, particularly whatever. It's these references, battles or adventures. And I think this is one of the most epic songs that they have ever written. It is indeed, in my opinion, comparable to Bathory kind of epic and Manowar kind of epic. So I mean, it's not no wonder that the working title was that. And I really like epic music, and this is one of the most epic songs that I heard. It has all these brass sounds that French Alexis mentioned that he likes so much. And honestly, one thing it makes me think about sometimes is the music for Pirates of the Caribbean, which I also love absolutely. Which is also another one of the most epic music ever written, in my opinion. It reminds me of it.
But is it folk metal?
I know that Henry must listen to a lot of film composers because I know that's been a big influence of his.
Yeah.
And
well, however, Pirates of the Caribbean came after.
Oh, sure. But I just mean that, and I don't even necessarily know about that connection, but I know that if you're into film composing, then Danny Elfman and Hans Zimmer are people you have to listen to.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely a combination of the resources that Henry got from the composers and the imagination that Henry developed because of his absolute love for fantasy, from video games to books. So basically, I think this song states really well those two words, maybe the hand and the mind coming all together. And
that's an interesting dynamic of Moonsorrow that I'd never really thought about until now. But it's like Henry writes fantasy music, but Ville doesn't write fantasy lyrics.
That's all. Yeah.
And it's kind of takes this fantasy thing and tries to ground it in. Yeah, so it's kind of in this like halfway state between real and
again we can go back into these all different movements in terms of how there is a more thrash component from Mitja and a more black metal, way more black metal component from Marcus. You know, everyone contributes in a completely different way than actually opposite way, and that's what makes Moonsorrow so strange and so great at the same time.
I would love to be a fly on the wall during a recording session, or even just when they're
any recording
figuring out what any session, doesn't matter.
Yeah,
anything really, for sure.
There must be like footage of this stuff, right? Like
there is.
Really? Of
them recording stuff? Yeah. Every now and then you see
from this period, perhaps.
No, I mean not from this period, but definitely there is. You know, I mean, for the footage I've seen.
For later albums, yes.
But it doesn't change much. You know, it's like, okay, this is Kivenkantaja, that will be amazing to see. But at the end of the day, I think the dynamic they have, the way they do things is pretty much the same.
It doesn't have to be this record. It could be anyone.
Yeah, really. It can be anyone. That's the point. Yeah, that's the point for me, at least.
Yeah.
When I saw them in the studio, it was like, it could have been this or Jamal Tenaika or whatever. It's just, it's you know, Moonsorrow.
I think one way they keep it fresh is they only make an album every 15 years. So definitely doesn't get.
Well, actually, until now it was 2001, 2003, 2005, 2007. So at that in that period it was still, you know, very, very often.
It's like
exponential delays. I mean, I remember I was talking with Marco once, and he was like, "Man, if it's to me, it would be every second year." A new record, but Henry doesn't have the time. That's the main problem, really.
The next song is Kivenkantaja, a song that usually Ville introduces in concerts by saying no happiness at all, and everything is bad and everything is depressive. Is that what this song makes you think of?
Not at all.
Me neither.
No.
A little bit.
Yeah, I more agree with Alexi. There is this part, the song goes like a waltz.
Yeah, super happy.
It's not that happy, I think. Actually, Kivenkantaja, the song reminds me of the music of a very, very famous French film, and I forgot the name, Amélie Poulain.
Amélie, yeah, it's called Amélie outside.
The music is composed by a French composer called Yann Tiersen. And there is this waltz vibe in all the movie, and it's not a sad movie, but it's not that funny either. Yeah, Kivenkantaja doesn't make me happy at all. It doesn't depress me, but it doesn't make me happy.
Well, not all of the song is happy, especially the beginning could be, I mean, not the most oppressive song for sure, but there is a bit more these low tones, or I wish I knew how to explain this in a bit more musical terms, but from more or less about the half, it becomes very happy, and it has a happy chorus there somewhere, and it has some happy parts.
I know what you're talking about, and I would say that it's not happy, but it has too much energy to be like sad. What the main part of the song that like makes me think of it as like a party song, not the same way like Raunioilla is a party song, but like there's, and I'll kind of talk about the time signatures and everything in it, but there's when
there is a part. This is super happy.
Sure, yeah. But I think when it goes into the 4/4 part where it's building and then it goes and it's just, like it's very bouncy and you want to jump around and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think I don't know that it's happy, but I feel like that it has too much energy and it's too rhythmic and energetic for me to be super like down and depressed. But maybe
that's a word for me. It's energetic, like it's really going up a lot. Even more than Jumalten Kaupunki, if you want to put it that way. It has a different feeling, definitely. But it's definitely a really energetic song.
It's energetic, but I think like it has this feeling of suffering when it comes to the vocals, because the vocals are not like this, like really open, but they are rather quite held to yourself. Like you're kind of like holding your teeth together and trying to not let all that hatred out. And just
right before starting this episode, I was watching a live video of this song. And my girlfriend was looking at it as well, and she said, the singer is not opening his mouth at all. Because it was like, as we say in Spanish, talking through the teeth. It's true, it is like that, like what you're describing.
Around the last quarter, I don't know why, but it reminds me a lot. They have a couple of melodies, especially because of the, let's call it the tone of the keyboards. But it reminds me a lot to the battle songs from Final Fantasy VII. It has a really epic video game vibe on that.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful.
Well, I think on the note of vocals, now's a good time to talk about, like the vocals on this song are the best on the album. And
Possibly.
yeah, I mean, in my opinion, right? And I don't know, I think Ville's vocals in the demos go from like not really working to like, okay, this is kind of working. And I'd say on the first two Moonsorrow albums, they're pretty good. I don't think anyone would listen to the album and say like, yeah, they're pretty good, but I don't like the vocals. I mean, unless you're just not into that style or whatever. But this album, and particularly this song, is I think the first song in their discography where I would point to if I wanted to show someone that like Ville's vocals are like exceptional, like very good. I would say now he's one of the best vocalists that I've heard, but this is the first song and he's very, very good on this. And particularly that strain, it's the same part of the song that I was talking about earlier after the big build up and everything kind of lets loose.
Yeah, in the part where the choir says Kivenkantaja,
it's just so well done. One thing I'm curious about, because I'm not as knowledgeable on this stuff, is how involved was Marco in writing this song?
Not very, because he's not credited. He was, by the way, in Jumalten Kaupunki, and I think he wrote more than Henry, but not this one. I mean, because we didn't mention it before, I mentioned it now, but here he's not credited, so probably not much.
When we first started talking about this album, I mentioned that, like, to me, this is the first album in their discography that musicians and songwriters would like have a lot to learn from. And I think the difference between Jumalten Kaupunki and this demonstrates that. Like, Jumalten Kaupunki is amazing and it's epic, but it like there's not a lot you can learn on paper, right? It's just like these sounds were amazing and can't learn anything, because if you make those sounds again, then you made Jumalten Kaupunki. You didn't make your own song. But Kivenkantaja is, I think, a master class of rhythmic writing, like the rhythms and the song, the time signatures and the melodies and just generally the rhythms and how things transition on this song are incredible. And you might not notice it exactly, but you definitely feel it. And there's a lot of uncommon time signatures on this song. Like, in terms of, we were talking before, like progressiveness, like maybe Raunioilla sounds the most progressive because of the synths and whatever. Like, it has the kind of more of a Pink Floyd, King Crimson, Cream sound. But in terms of the time signatures and rhythms and stuff like that, Kivenkantaja is just outstanding.
And on top of that, let's consider that Kivenkantaja has 7 minutes and a half. So how consistent, how many fucking things are happening, and how effective the song it is in such a short period of time. 7 minutes is nothing for the song.
Yeah, and so the other thing that I talked about, okay, so the song starts out in like a normal like waltz time in 6 or 3 or however you want to count it, whatever. They're divisible by each other. So if I need to count it, I can count it. I don't really know how they would write it down.
The waltz, typically waltz is 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2,
right.
3, 1, 2.
Yeah. And that's how the song starts, and then it goes into the da-na, da-na, that's in 3. But then when that first verse starts, it goes into 5, which I talked about being like a big, like...
I noticed that.
Yeah, and it's for a long time that it stays in 5. Yeah. Like, Raunioilla is in 5 for that one little intro bit, and they got that from Cream. This is...
Even the main melody, no?
Yeah, and when they're like saying Kivenkantaja. And that rhythm, someone who says they're not a musician, Abel, you're very good at keeping time and odd time signatures. I noticed that earlier. But yeah, no. So that rhythm is called the 5/4 clave. I read somewhere. It's kind of like long, long, short, short, long, long, short, short rhythm, and it's all over that song. It's all over Tu l'anaia tu ma. Ra na 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 na. And they do it so well. The rhythm shows up a few places here and there in like more popular songs. The Mission Impossible theme is in that rhythm. Dun 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 dun.
No, I think that is because I think when it's fast, it is tarata tarata tarata. No, wait. Dun dun dun. Tarata 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 tarata. So it's a lot more.
I mean, yeah, you can count it the same way, but it's still, you're counting to 10, but you're just adding more notes, right? But 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2 still adds to 10. So instead of 5, you're counting 10. You're just adding more notes. But yeah, they do that for a really long time, and there's lots of melodies. It doesn't sound.
It's how you group them, because it's 10, but it's so 1, 2,
it's
3,
the same.
1, 2. But it's no, because then that is a long thing that you say. In this case, it's
threes are the long one, right?
It's not the same, yes, because in Kivenkantaja you don't have too long and too short. So in Mission Impossible you do have too long and too short, but in Kivenkantaja you have clearly 3 and 2. In Kivenkantaja you cannot do charata 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 charata. In Kivenkantaja it doesn't work.
Well, the rhythm is, I think if you follow the kick drum, it is dun 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 dun. But I think it's probably a little bit more accurate to say it's like da dun da dun 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 da dun. So then it's kind of like 4 shorts and 2 slightly longer. However you subdivide it, I think it's the same general idea. But they do like a lot of rhythms over that melody. The most famous song in 5 is a jazz song called Take 5, and it has the same rhythm. And when the jazz musicians there were recording that song, they had a really hard time, and that song they had to finish recording the song months later, even though they're this like big jazz group that's super experienced. And the song Money by Pink Floyd,
it's a 7.
It's in 7, but the solo goes to 4 because David Gilmour couldn't solo over 7. So like coming up with melodies and whatever over these time signatures is really difficult for a lot of really talented people. But it stays in 5 for a really long time. We're still in 5, and it's still in that weird time signature. It keeps that for a really long time. And then it does this weird, the build part that goes into, I think what makes that such a big highlight for the album is the transition, the ba da 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 na 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 na. You could count it a couple different ways. You could count it in 9, or you could say it's like 3 and then 6. But it's like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, na, 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 dun, 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 dun. And then when it finally goes into the 1, 2, 3, 4, it's just it's such a effective rhythmic thing, and it builds that. It's such a nice build that when it lets loose, it just carries so much energy in it. And I think maybe like melodically and lyrically, the song can be really sad, but I think what makes it so exciting to me is, one, how well it's doing all of this composition stuff. The reason I asked if Marco was involved is because, he's the drummer. And so you might think that some of the like more complex rhythms were like his ideas, but it's pretty clearly Henry, and he does this sort of thing a lot. And it just does a lot of really interesting things, and it just has such a good effect that I think if anybody is into trying to write progressive music, that the song Kivenkantaja and how they, because you can steal a rhythm and no one will notice, right? You can put whatever melody you want over it, and the way they transition between the rhythms and everything is just really, really, really well done.
I agree.
I mean, I'm trying to think like, I wouldn't say, of course, it's a weak song, but compared to what, it's that what I said at the beginning of the last episode, especially if you read the reviews, it is true that Kivenkantaja, it's where the album starts like not declining, but maybe the tone of the album feels different. There's something about Kivenkantaja as a song that feels different, not so spectacular as the first three songs. It really feels like it's, if you think about the vinyl version, like the side B of the vinyl, not entirely sure why the intention, if it's intentional or not, but especially with the following two songs, things start going like, I don't know, it's way too intense, everything at the beginning, and starts going a little bit more climatic, in the second half. Well, it doesn't make the album less interesting, of course, but it's what makes Kivenkantaja maybe a strange album in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, even with everything I just said, like the biggest, most epic moment isn't at the, like end of the album. It's right in the middle.
If you think in terms of how they resolved, maybe is the best word, Voimasta. Voimasta, if you think about Sankaritari Nights, it's like it kind of rescues the album in terms of it really puts the album in an epic tone, and just you the album is complete. But with Kivenkantaja, at least for me, from the song Kivenkantaja, even if it's a fucking amazing song.
Or the newest album, right? Like Jumalta ends with the big like epic
exactly
ending, right? Like it's kind of like having that in the middle.
It's round, that's the point. It's circular. It's that's the point about even Verisäkeet. I think that of course it's not a spectacular album, it's my favorite album, but again it gives me a sensation that it's complete, it's circular, it's resolved. With Kivenkantaja, I always have the feeling like there's something missing, maybe.
I think when I was younger, and I think when I was listening to this album, I don't know, the first 10 times or something, I agreed with you, and I still agree with you with what you're saying in terms of the song after this. But I don't know, I have grown to really appreciate this song. And so for me, it doesn't really lose the energy as much. It's not as climactic, but it doesn't have that effect. But I do know what you're talking about, and it's something that when we get into the next song,
it's actually the song that's been played the most on Spotify.
Kivenkantaja?
Yeah, of the whole album, it's the song that's been played the most.
Okay.
Yeah, see, that's super interesting, and it translates well live. I think it doesn't have as many big synth parts that you can't replicate. And
actually, thank you for mentioning that, because this relates to Kivenkantaja, but also to Jumalten Kaupunki. There are lots of parts that are done by the keyboard in the studio version, but are taken to guitar in live version, especially in the second half of the song. Yeah, so where in the studio version you have guitars doing chords or whatever they're doing, and the melodies are in the keyboard. Live, the guitars take the protagonism over Markus. Markus, of course, is doing his things, but then Mitja and Janne are also doing a lot of finger work.
Which I think I'm trying to remember the specific sound here. It's been a while since I've heard a live version, but are you talking about like the da ba da 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 ba da 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 da, like is that being played on guitar? Or?
For example, that, but there's many parts, even a lot of melodies, and I cannot say exactly now, but listen to find something on YouTube, and you will realize that lots of things that the guitars are doing are done by because there isn't so much guitar in the studio recording. They're mostly in the background, but you can see, Mikkel and Jan really working with that.
Okay, shall we jump to the next one, if you want?
Let me mention two things. One is that probably it's no secret, but the part where you hear a voice saying Kivenkantaja, Kivenkantaja. That is, I'm sure you know.
Is it Mitya?
Yeah, Mikkel, yeah.
Okay.
With his super deep voice that he uses. Every time that you hear that, it's also in Jastas into it. No,
yes.
sorry. The next one, Tulen Ajetuma.
Which Tulen Ajetuma is my favorite song ever. Which is maybe part of the reason why I like Kivenkantaja so much, because it reminds me so much of that. I do have a question. There's when it goes into that big 4/4 part, there's one part with overlaid vocals.
Wait. Which part is it? Can you sing again, please? Happy.
Yeah, and Vila is doing his growling vocals like right when it comes in. And then there's one line where you can hear extra vocals on top of it, and when they do it live, Mitya does that part. But I wonder if on the record if it's Vile's being recorded over it, or if it's Mitya or who.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and he does it live.
I never noticed, but I'm never standing on Mitya's side. So that's probably why I never notice it. I'm always on Janne's side, so don't have much focus on the
any particular reason why you're on the Janne's side?
No, I don't know actually.
No, actually, it's for me the same as Mikkel. I'm always on Janne's side. It's
okay.
Probably because
for some reason I just end up being on that side. Maybe it's because I was there first time and then I just stick with it. I have no idea.
I don't know. Every time I saw Moonsorrow, the door was on Janne's side, so I just enter and stick to my place.
I like more, well, from the filming point of view, the Mitya side, it's easier. It's less shit happening. On the Janne side, you have Marcus, you have Janne moving quite a lot. Mitya is not more static, but it's easier to, get Mitya on frame, I would say.
Okay, I got the lyric, I got the timestamp, and here is a link to exactly when Mitya does it live.
Oh boy, I gotta watch it.
There you go. Because that's not something they really do that much on the records, like have the vocals over it. And maybe because Mitya does it live, I wondered if somebody else does it on the Mitya or somebody else does it on the actual song, or if it's just, but yeah, that's a little detail that I always hear in that song. Who is that? Is that Vile? Is that Mitya? Is it?
Okay, now I heard it in the studio version as well.
Yeah. Yes. So
I wouldn't. I don't know who it is, but it could perfectly be himself.
Could be.
Because
But,
I suppose it doesn't require. I mean, Mitya's voice for that Kivenkantaja part is pretty unique, but this one is nothing special, I suppose.
I think it's just a great little piece of ear candy.
I mean, it sounds cool. But it's nothing too complicated or too unique. It's a good addition,
right?
But not in a very special voice. Just it fits well here.
Yeah, and I love that. I always like listen for that part. It's just ear candy, just like little details.
Yeah.
And I love that they do it live. Also, I don't know what that line means, and now I have no way of knowing.
No wind shall rise.
It's pretty fucking sick. I would have guessed like that. I guess that makes sense. Tulan Koti, home of the wind.
And Nose, I know because Tuli Myrski Nose. And the firestorm rises. So I know it's Nose. And bits and pieces of Moonsorrow words. I can get some.
It's in Matkan Lopussa. There's like a bunch of words that are in other song titles, and I'm like, dark echo.
There is a line here in this song that only last week, listening to the album for the podcast episode, and after 14 years getting it wrong, I thought it said Kantaja, Kivenkantaja, nara na nara na.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
But no, it says Kantaja, Kivenkironnut kuninkaitapoltanut matakanahan. So it's Kantaja Kiven.
What the fuck?
It's not Kantaja Kivenkantaja. It's Kantaja Kivenkironnut kuninkaitap. So
no. Vile's line is what's written there, but no, I think the background. I think Mitya in the background is just saying Kivenkantaja. I don't think he does that.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, but I thought that Vile said Kantaja, Kivenkantaja, nara, but no. 9.
Apparently not.
Apparently not. And the last note I have here is that at the end of the song, again, towards the end, right before the last chon 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 chon. Right before, there is another like we mentioned in, I think it was in Micah. And in the live video that you just shared from Kilkim Žaibu 2014, that is the one I was watching before, right before now.
Yeah.
And I noticed how Mitya does that part as well. Not so, it's a bit more simplified, but he does that as well. Let's finish by appreciating how the beginning of the song and the end are almost the same, just with a minor difference in the beginning being a lot more aggressive, I think. But I love how it ends. End.
Yeah, it's super.
Probably the first song of the album that finishes right away and not with a
not transition into the next
long fade out.
It makes it really easy for me to skip the next song because it doesn't transition.
And now we transition into that.
I don't remember how Jumaltenkaupunki ends. Does it end completely? Because for sure, Raunioilla 6 into Unogdisnolapsi 6 into Jumaltenkaupunki.
Jumaltenkaupunki. Go ahead.
Sorry, it fades out into Kivenkantaja. It's not like
and where the violin is still sounding.
That fades out.
But the transition is probably less remarkable than Raunioilla into Unodixonlapsi.
Yeah, and Unodixonlapsi into
Jumaltenkaupunki.
But this one ends ending. Ending. Okay, let's go to anything else to say about this? Then let's go to Sasan's favorite. Sasan, tell us something about Tul and Tita.
It's
your moment.
No, I mean, I don't know. I feel like if anybody likes the song, then this song deserves to have nice things said about it. I don't want to just start off by setting the mood of this song not being good. But one thing we realized earlier on a different album when we were talking about is I think the piano sound doesn't really go with Moonsorrow that well. And this song just feels really repetitive in all of the ways that Kivenkantaja does really interesting things with rhythms and transitions and stuff like that. I think that's what makes the song feel like you're moving, you're going different places, something has changed. This song doesn't really do that. It's one rhythm for the whole thing, a lot of the same melodies. And I don't know, like, to me, it's a little boring when you have one rhythm coming, and you're like, what's going to happen next? And what happens next is so, oh, okay, we're still here. So
I think it really serves
everything while somebody's playing coconuts as if he was riding on a horse in the Holy Grail. I always think of that with the Holy Grail reference.
You know the trick of sound design. If you don't have a horse to record for a scene, so you use coconuts.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, reviewing the song a little bit, I think that it serves a purpose. I won't say it's the perfect song for the album, but definitely, it makes the job pretty well. It is repetitive, of course. It could have been more this and more that. But I think that the song to blame is the following song, because if this is like it's a little bit more an ambient song that sets the mood down a little bit so you can breathe.
It's very new age in the beginning. It's new age
strange, but again, the mood that the song transmits to me, at least, I really love it. It makes me feel really warm, really comfortable. I really feel like the song is a good addition to Kivenkantaja. But what happens is, okay, if this is the entrance for what it comes next, probably, I don't know, my problem is definitely with the next song, not with this one. This one, honestly, I'm
always mostly driven by nostalgia when I'm listening to something. Yeah. So I'm not always like very quick, if I can say that. So Tul and Tutar, there is the 3 first minutes of the song. I really enjoy it because it reminds me of all the folk music from Brittany I was listening with my dad when I was young. And I still listen to that. After the beginning of the song, when the vocals kicks in, this I was liking it earlier, the talking voice. On this one, I think it's not great. I'm not really into it. And probably the thing that I would have enjoyed to listen on the end of this album is to have Tul and Matkan Lopussa in one big song, and probably with more time to explore musical constructions and atmospheres. I think the two just played one after one another. It's too long for 2 songs. Probably one more rich would have been a better choice, but there is most likely an explanation to that. And I really enjoyed the beginning of Tul and Tutar. The end, not very much. And after we go to Matkan Lopussa, and I just want to go back to Jumalten Kaupunki at this point, mainly. But the song's not bad. It's just, it feels like, it's a real place? I don't know.
Well, so yeah, I think one of the things that we've talked about before is how like emotionally driven a lot of the best Moonsorrow songs are. Certainly every song they released after this album is very, except the one I don't like on the newest album. Like, it's very clearly emotion driven, and this song kind of doesn't really make me feel anything. Like you can listen to it, but it kind of just sounds like instruments. It doesn't really feel like it's about something, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. For me, it's just there. I mean, if I listen to the whole album, which I rarely do, I always end it at Kivenkantaja and then listen to something else, right? But if it would go through, it's just there. I don't really have a comment on that song.
Well, I like it a lot. Well, not a lot compared to others, or
it's decent, but I like it better than some other.
But I do like it. The previous one probably all of the better, but I do like the song. It's very, I don't know, it's like kind of bucolic. It's a bit like Tulenkoti, Antolenkoti that I remember also.
Yeah, but you know, it's like, despite that, Henry's a perfectionist. So what puzzles me about the way that this album is not composed, but maybe finished and presented to people, it's Henry is really good at managing the mood of an album. And this particular ending for Kivenkantaja, these last two songs, you know, on one side, I would say exactly what has been said before in terms of, it's true what Thomas says, it could have been one song, obviously. But in the other hand, it's like, I don't know, it's the balance is way too, it's a big despair in terms of how the album starts and how it goes down with the last two songs. And if there's a purpose behind that, because Henry is not the kind of guy who will put extra songs to fill up minutes on an album, you know?
Well, that's something I was going to transition to asking about. Not that this was just written to fill up the album, right? But with a lot of bands, you are writing an album, so you write, 15 songs and you pick your favorite 8, you put them on the album. But Moonsorrow songs there's such a time investment, I'm sure, to write and take so much effort to record, especially on this album, with how long all the songs are and how many layers are going on. So I guess the question I want to ask people who would know better than me is, are there like unreleased Moonsorrow songs that like aren't covers?
For sure, for the last album. For sure, I heard from Harry that Jumalt and Aika left a lot of material that they didn't use, but for sure that's a thing. But it feels, of course this is not confirmed, that particularly in Kivenkantaja, it feels like they were so exhausted when they finished all the arrangements on the first half of the album that it doesn't feel that they have this leftover material to evaluate and complete the rest of the album. Because again, I wouldn't say that any decision coming from Henry is not a logical decision, but it's really weird on why they have chosen these last two songs to finish Kivenkantaja.
We keep lumping them together, the last two songs. Personally, I really like the last song. I don't think they would go together, and I think the last song is a great way of ending things. But I think just the vibe that I get from this song is that it was an idea that didn't end up as strong as the other ideas, but they had already put all of this work into it, and maybe someone will like it and it'll end up on the album. And I always think of it as an instrumental, but it's not an instrumental. It has Vile's narration again.
Yeah.
And it has a choir part. Yeah.
The Balsaga signature again.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably the thing, right? You have the last album you wanted, Aika, where they basically scrapped the whole album because it didn't have the feel it needed to have. But maybe times were different back then, so they kind of had to go with, because I really want to know what is the purpose of the last two songs. I mean, sure, you can dedicate the last song to Korthan, but why did you make it in the first place? I can kind of feel the understanding on why you make like Kaiku, but this has nothing with Moonsorrow in it. Like Kaiku is them singing everything, but who is this woman and why is she there? I don't understand why.
We are still in Twitter.
Yeah, sure. But it's talking about it as one song.
Yeah. I kind of have said what I have to say about
I think
it.
that at the same point, I mean, of course, we didn't finish with all the songs, but in different ways, what we are all saying, maybe from a more instrumental approach or mood approach or etc. I think that we all, when the album finishes, intensity is not defined by the amount of instruments you are using. It's not defined by the tempo. It's not defined by the amount of voices you have. It's defined by another thing. It's more like a feeling, and it's so much feeling and so much, pressure in the first songs, and it's so flat, if you want to put it that way, on the last two songs, that it really feels like, it's like an incognito there. It's an unresolved thing.
I mean, every single album after this, maybe apart from Kaiku, has like the most incredible way to end an album. It's the most bombastic way of ending it with, and it doesn't have to be like, it can also be a really great outro or whatever, right? It's just so carefully planned out.
I think when you think about the, let's say 30 minutes from the start of the album to Jumalten Kaupunki, like we talked about how well everything transitions. That kind of paints you in a little bit of a corner, right? Because you either start the album with something other than Raunioilla, which I don't think is a good idea. I think that's the best way to start it. Or you end it with something different than Jumalten Kaupunki, or you have a 30-minute album. Because you can't really put anything in the middle, So I think that's just kind of the situation is, well, we're either going to have to add something to beginning, add more songs to the beginning or add more songs to the end. And, you can't really top Jumalten Kaupunki, so kind of maybe go the other.
I think this song, Tulen Titar Soturin Tie, could go, or wouldn't be too bad, between Uimahtuks and Lapsi and Jumalten Kaupunki. I think it wouldn't be so bad because Uimahtuks and Lapsi starts like very aggressive, then it softens down, so to say. And I don't remember exactly how it ends, but it's something a bit like more acoustic or more calm, if I don't remember wrong. And then the beginning of Jumalten Kaupunki is this spoken intro also with some windy thing and some, so in between you could put Tulen Titar, which is calm and windy and bucolic, and then Jumalten Kaupunki could come.
I mean, I could actually get that if you had Matkan Lopussa as after Jumalten Kaupunki or after Kivenkantaja, just talking about, maybe it's, I don't know what the song in itself is about, but after Ragnarok, maybe, from Jumalten Kaupunki, and this lonely lady stands on a hill somewhere and sings about what actually happened or the aftermath that's going on with
or even
things alive.
And maybe not even as literally as that, right? Like where literally the lyrics are about that, but just that kind of epilogue feeling, right? Where the epilogue doesn't need to have this climactic feeling. That, and we keep transitioning to talking about Matkan Lopussa, which Alba doesn't like. But if we're, well, I'm ready to talk about it for the record.
Well, I would like to mention a couple of the more technical aspects of it. I suppose that you are not very much in the mood of talking
about where
Tulen Titar ends and Soturin Tie starts. I couldn't really figure out exactly because 250, I wrote down some timestamps, and 250 could be because this is when the guitars start, but then at 400 there is a different melody that doesn't resemble so much the previous ones, and then later it's also where the talking starts and the choir, but then perhaps at 530 it goes back to Tulen Titar because there are resembling melodies, and then at 650 it could go back to Soturin Tie again. So it could be this back and forth, but maybe you guys didn't think much about.
No, I've never really.
No, I think that we never came back to these particular two songs. That's the point. I mean, I really think it depends on the situation. If you're walking next to the beach and you have leftover time and you want to listen to the whole album, But if you're listening to Kivenkantaja to listen to Kivenkantaja, probably Kivenkantaja finished on the fourth song.
Yeah, and I
don't want to be cruel, but like it's.
Well, and I think in terms of it's Tulentitar including so Tulentie. I think on the more lyrical songs, it's easier to draw the division between like, oh, this is this part, because a lot of times it's like labeled, right? But with the instrumental stuff, it is harder to guess like which part is supposed to be what song, or is it just a cute way of naming a song? I don't know.
Well, but I mean, in
Jumalte Kaupunki, you said it's like labeled.
Yeah, it is labeled, but because of, I mean, you can read the lyrics and see when the lyrics end for one and the rest start, but even musically it does sound different. And if they wanted to call something different the outro part, they could have, and one would clearly see. Even a live video I found of Jumalte Kaupunki, whoever was recording stopped after the last, because he thought that the next was a different song.
Right.
But actually they were just continuing with the ton 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 ton.
Yeah.
But in this song, it doesn't really feel like two separate ones. Melodies kind of reference each other, so it's not so clear. And there is another similarity with your other favorite, which is that again we have an instrumental with lyrics, but the lyrics are just written but never heard in the. And it's actually 3 verses, so they're even long lyrics. But
oh wow!
They're just for the booklet, which is it's an interesting thing to do. I think they didn't really do it again, but they did it twice in the first 3 albums. All right, now that's fine. We can go continue with Matkan Lopussa. Let's go.
First of all, who is singing on there?
Petra Lindberg, and I believe this is some friend of Henry's. Simply, maybe he thought a female voice could work here. He had a friend who was a singer, and he asked her something like that.
I mean, it's not just if it's just someone he happened to know. That's awesome because I mean, has a gorgeous voice.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds so good, and the whole song really makes a lot of use of harmony, and her harmonizing with herself over it is just so well done, and she just has an amazing voice. And yeah, I'm always really, really impressed by it, and I've always wondered like who is this person? What other music does she have? Like, is this someone from a band that they asked to come in, or is it? But it sounds like we don't really know what the other musical. Well, we should ask.
It was definitely not part of the, I would call it like people in circulation around Moonsorrow. It was not a name that came up. It's actually the first time I hear about the name. So it was like, it sounds like it was. Henry has musical connections, of course.
Sure.
So definitely.
Yeah, it's the first and last time she's participating in anything.
I think I do want to explore what Mikkel said, which is, I mean, I think he's right. I think especially after this, but even in all the conversation we've been having, Moonsorrow is so about the people in that band expressing their ideas. Like they don't even like playing with backing tracks live, right? It's just it's a very personal thing, and they want the music to come from them. So it is very strange to have, they have guest musicians on like violin. They have Heathen on a lot of the albums, but it is strange given how personally driven the music is to have somebody else sing a song. But I don't know.
What else? What else would you do here? Because I don't think any of them with clean vocals would really do justice to this. So what do you do? And there are no women in the band.
But I think a lot of us have kind of said that like for them, Kivenkantaja, the song, is the end of Kivenkantaja, the album. For me, I skipped from Kivenkantaja to Matkan Lopussa. I really think The instrumentation on it is just gorgeous. The accordion on it and the subtle synth effects in the background. The choir is not the most bombastic choir that they've ever recorded, but maybe just the arrangement and the voices is just gorgeous. It's just really, really, I just think it's a beautiful song.
I think it is a beautiful song, but I think that, you know, from a less instrumental perception, I think that there are two key components that make the song not so noticeable in your memory. And first of all, it's a matter of context. How big is the gap in between Kivenkantaja and this song? You know, you kind of get, you don't really know how you arrived there. It really feels a little bit like that. That first. So the interconnection, it's complicated. But second, is the fact that the song is beautiful. But the question is the song effective? Is the song that really sticks on your memory? I think that if it would be a song that sticks on your memory, most of the opinion will be different in terms of, yeah, of course, it's a beautiful song. It's the kind of song that I always go back to Moonsorrow. And of course, I do see the purpose. But for a finale, you know, like for a grand final for this album, maybe that's a problem. Maybe it's a matter of expectations. Maybe it's a matter of, you know, we all have expectations when you listen to an album. We are not composers, but we do get a mood and we want that mood to be resolved. And probably if there's an issue with this song, that I don't think that there's any issue, but would make most of us maybe stop before this song arrives, and what makes people say maybe in the reviews it's an anticlimactic ending. You know, it's a combination of both things. It's a beautiful song, but maybe it's not that effective compared to what we are coming from.
I think going back to what Abel said earlier about an epic being in some ways inherently tied into the concept of like fighting, this ending certainly doesn't sound like the fighting was won.
No, true.
Yeah,
exactly.
It sounds a little bit like a loss, which I think is a huge transition from the Jumalten Kaupunki, like, you know, you're writing that.
Exactly, and maybe that's also the issue. It's like, if from a storytelling point of view, it's really easy to follow what happens in the first 4 songs. But the interpretation on this ending is so wide and so strange, and so you don't really know what happened there, you know, in these last 2 songs. And that's what happened to me with Kivenkantaja, because Kivenkantaja gave me a lot of space for imagination over the first 4 songs. It's like a playground. It's fucking amazing. But in these last 2 songs, I kind of get lost, you know. It's like, it's just my opinion, of course, but it always happened to me since I heard the album for the first time. And now you say it, no, I agree with Mikkel. I never come back to these last 2 songs if I don't really have the time.
You were talking about if you were walking on the beach, maybe you had time to listen to it. I would for sure enjoy it, but it's something like Tulinkuti, like you come out of this trance in the middle of the song, realizing, oh, it is actually a new song, and it's not as good as the other ones that I've heard during this walk in the forest or wherever, or on the beach. But I appreciate it, sure, it's very nice, but it's not the same. You kind of get awakened from whatever trance you were in.
Abel wants to say something, and I'm gonna let you finish. But what I'll say to your point, Mikkel, is if, let's say 100 people were making 100 different Moonsorrow playlists, Matkan Lopussa either doesn't get included or is included in the end. Like, there's nowhere else to put it. You can't put it in the middle of Moonsorrow music. It's only an ending. The song gets stuck in my head a lot. I think about it a lot. It's a song I really enjoy. I'd say that appreciation for it started much more recently. It's not something I listened to a lot when I was growing up, but I think it was one of those things that I kind of like rediscovered
I'm agree with that. I think it's a song to rediscover, actually. I think that's
sure, for sure. Abel.
But yeah, what I was going to say earlier is that the lyrics in these last two songs, or should we call them three, because lyrically it's like they were three, are quite different. Well, maybe the last one. So let's see. Tulen Tütar, Daughter of the Wind. This is like a poetic description of some kind of forest spirit or something like this, something like more like fantasy than one would expect from Moonsorrow. Well, the music kind of fits for this, but it's very unusual in Moonsorrow. Hear the Daughter of the Wind singing her fairest song, how gently her silent breath caresses the lilies on the open lake. Till the end of time, Daughter of the Wind is singing her fairest song, a lost waif guided home by her call, the sleeping woodland cradled by her hand. Then the Soturentia, the way of a warrior, is describing a soldier in a very Voimasta Yakuniasta style. Grand is his power and enormous his strength, men grown on barren lands, grown under an icy wind, which don't really fit much the rest of the album from what we have seen. And then this last one, Matkan Lopussa, at the end of a journey, or at the journey's end. This fits a bit more because it's kind of dark, as you said, sounds like defeat. And I think it's about basically death or somebody's farewell when dying. So it says, "Oh, my weighing mind, like all the earth, my fading life behind the moss. In the shelter of these primal trees, forsaken I may lie. The birds, they're gone, leaves are my company. Tears of my heart, dewfall of my soul. Let the wind carry my cares afar. Once will the worldly curtain fall before all men. Oh, hear me sing this one last song, echoing through the heavens." It sounds like somebody dying. So,
well, yeah, and on just that concept is really similar to Sankare Terina, but the emotion that they use to approach that theme feels very different, right? It's not like the big Viking funeral and now I'm with the other Vikings in the Sky Castle. It's a little bit
bucolic again.
Yeah.
I'm just alone here and I died here in the grass.
Watch me rot beneath the leaves.
Anything else to say about Matkan Lopussa? I definitely want to mention the whole backstory with the Russian song and all of that.
Of course.
If you guys don't have anything to say about that.
Everything I know about it, I read from your blog. So
okay, so I will record that part on my own and then I will join it with whatever Alexis sends because he also
I really don't have much to add.
But I wanted to say about Matkan Lopussa. I also like it, and I also think it's very beautiful, very sweet. The voice fits very well. It's very good for ending the album, and in the concerts, as they have used it lots of times as an outro, as a recorded outro, while they say goodbye to people and take photos and then leave. But I do have a little problem with the song, which is the instrumental part. I don't really like. The melody is beautiful, the singing is beautiful, but the mouth harp just doing boing, boing, it's a bit lame. And basically it's just a keyboard doing new age stuff, not doing much. And there is an accordion doing something, but also not that much. And it's like it's missing. It's too atmospheric. I wish it was, of course, not heavier, but it had a bit more to it, not just the voice and the background.
To put it this way, I mean, if the song will have ended in an absolutely atmospheric 5 minutes empty forest thing, it will have worked for me. I will have said a completely different thing because it kind of completes more the feeling, the album, etc. But the song itself, the resolution of the song, it's what I don't end up connecting with the rest of the album. It's more the proposed thing behind the song.
I think what all of you are saying is right. I think you're all making really good points. And what it's making me think of is we always talked about Kivenkantaja as being the album where they achieved everything they had been trying on Voimasta and more.
Said by them.
They took and they've said that, but I think the truth of it is that they didn't get Matkan Lopussa right. I think that Abel is right, the mouth harp and all that. It feels like they're trying to make this a Moonsorrow song and it's not quite working. I think Mikkel pointed out the parallel. I think the one thing where they didn't let it go after this album and they kept pushing it and improving it is, I think Kaiku is what Matkan Lopussa wanted to be. I think
that ending is perfect, like you said, Leo. If they had like Kaiku ending, like you already said, the lyrics are like, I'm alone in the forest dying. Okay, let's listen to The Home of the Wind or whatever, right? Just listen to.
I mean, the point is, it feels like the first 4 songs are really well connected. They were all really like straightforward on what they want to do. It feels like the last song has to be included on the album, so they knew that had to be the ending. So at some point they tried to make a connection in between this epic 4-pack and this last song. The connection doesn't really work, but this last song it doesn't really feel connected because I don't really feel like it was composed with the rest in the progression of the rest of the songs in mind. So it was like, okay, we need to finish this song, the album with this song. Let's try to join it with the rest. It feels a little bit like that. Again, maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I say. Maybe if you finish the album with, I don't know, with that, it would be a completely different story because it connects more with the cover, with the feeling, everything.
Yeah.
I think if I had to choose another ending, I would move Tulen Tuta before Kivenkantaja, because then the album just ends with dun 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 dun. That's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing else. That would have been an epic ending as well.
Yeah.
And you're like, holy shit, what happened there?
Really?
And then when it goes into the bonus tracks, it wouldn't.
Are you with us?
Now time for some old shit. Every time that happens, I'm like in this calm, serene. Whoa!
Holy shit.
On the CD, it was 2 different discs, but every time I listen to it on Spotify, I have to remember to hit stop.
Well, let's say that I think that the important, Sasan said exactly what it is. It's like it's a song to rediscover for sure. I think that it deserves the appreciation from everyone, including us. Like, we should go back to that song. I will do it after we finish the podcast.
I don't know if you, Leo, remember, probably not, but in Oulu,
after 6 o'clock, I don't remember anything in Oulu.
All right, I remember this because it was like 3 a.m. perhaps. We were in the karaoke after the whole Moonsorrow concert thingy, everything.
Yeah.
And I got to sing in the karaoke.
Oh, that traditional song.
Yeah, in which one?
Fuck, man, that was weird. That was weird.
I did a fucking disaster vocally, but like saying, because I don't know how to sing, I'm absolutely terrible. But Ville said, well, I'm not talking about the voice, of course, but your pronunciation was amazingly good. Well, thank you. I was following the lyrics on the screen, of course, it's a karaoke, but well, I didn't butcher it too much.
The only thing I remember from that period of time is they gave us, when we went to choose the songs, they gave us like glasses. They have a collection of glasses with different graduation, depending on how fucking blind you were. So I got these glasses and I forgot to give back the glasses, so I kept them in my pockets. I was so fucking drunk, man. And you were singing the song. Actually, I think it was in that moment that you were singing the song and I was like, fuck this shit, I need some air. So I went out for a cigarette. And I kept like looking at the glasses like, fucking hell, I'm so drunk. And Mitcha came and he was like, man, are you okay? And I was like, no, man.
No, I'm not.
That's the only thing I remember from the whole night, man. And after that, I woke up. It was a funny moment. I really enjoyed it.
Okay. The cover has some stories, right? If we finish with the music.
Well, I don't know how much the people know about the cover, because I really love the way they tell the story in the documentary. And I mean, to portray how I feel about the cover and the video, because I think that both things are connected in my head. That's Moonsorrow being Moonsorrow, you know? It's like, it's Moonsorrow trying to be fucking epic about something and failing so much in such a funny way, man. I mean, it's those things that you see that they had the best intentions and things were like really wrong. You know,
a good idea, but a bad.
Not because it's like it's not when they tell the story. It's not like, oh, we were drunk, we broke it, or we no. It's like everything is against them when they try to do things, and you feel like, fuck, man. I mean, you really deserve to have the best cover ever and the best video ever, but you know, the world is against them, and I think that this particular Kivenkantaja cover, the whole story is hilarious.
So not that anyone listens to this, but let's imagine someone is. What's the story? I know a little bit about it, right? But it's runes on a big ass rock, and on the cover it's in the snow with some trees in the background.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the intention?
So the story is that they had this idea of making a runestone, like this old Viking runestone that were marking, but they were mostly like tombstones.
Sweden, right? Yeah.
Sorry?
Sweden has quite a lot of them.
Yeah, Sweden, Norway.
Yeah, and Denmark and Norway.
Denmark also?
Yeah, sure.
So usually they have the name of the person written in runes, and they have some typical motifs like snakes or something like this. So they said, let's make our own. They put this sun wheel that they also had in Voimasta, and they wrote Moonsorrow and Kivenkantaja. So they knew, or they found, I don't know if they knew them previously, but this guild of the rune carvers or something like this. What is that? Okay, you're showing us.
That's the Danish passport. We even have the runes on our passport.
Oh, fucking hell, man. That's so epic.
And that's how important they are in Denmark, because this is made from, this is Jesus Christ. So it was just before Christianity in Denmark. So like, this is the marking of Vikings and Christianity. And
so that is like, all right, so it's Jesus Christ with his arms open in the cross, and then like it's like some knots all around him. No, it's not a snake, it's just knots.
No, it's just the ornament thing, right?
The cross was a lot more abstract than this telling of the story.
Fuck you, man. In Spain we have fucking motorbikes. I mean, fuck our passport. What the fuck is this shit, man?
This is the epic shit.
This is not epic, man, actually.
So
this is the Moonsorrow passport.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, the Guild of the Rune Scratchers, that was their name. And they were making runestones. So they commissioned one, but the stone turned out to be much heavier than they expected. So they needed a lot of people to just put it on a truck, take it to some forest, and they wanted to take it to the middle of the forest or walk a bit with it, but it was so heavy that they put it just by the side of the road.
Basically, they didn't think about the logistics. That's the point. I mean, the idea was great. You know, like, okay, we won the rock, and when these people finished the rock, it was like, okay, get rid of this rock. Our job is done. And they were like, oh no, it's a fucking rock. And when they saw the rock, they were like, how the fuck do we move this?
Where do we move this? They even put it in like this wheelbarrow that has one wheel, and you hold it on two sticks, and the wheel just exploded, and you could hear the metal screeching. Totally
there are two versions, because Mitcha said one thing and Billy one thing. So it looks like the transportation had like two stages, but at the end it's like, at the end it was so desperate they forced, you know, it's like they couldn't do it anymore. So they just left it.
Yeah, they just put it whatever. And then they took the photo, and the photo was okay, but then they sent it to the label, and then whoever was in charge in the label for the design of the they just put these weird effects, Photoshop effects and stuff, and just put it there. And Mitya, the photographer, was so disappointed with it.
Wow.
So
Well, the funny part is afterwards, the label paid for the fucking rock thing. And they were like, we paid for that. Where is it? And they were like, we just left it in the forest.
Wow.
Like, yeah.
Fuck that shit.
So they had to go back.
They
right?
had to go back
for it.
Yeah.
Oh
Wow.
God! I was gonna ask if it was still there.
No. And actually, I think during the transportation it broke in two, or soon after that it broke into somehow, and then it was in the backyard of Spine Farm for who knows how long, and somehow it ended up broken in several pieces. And who knows where those pieces are now?
Where is it now?
Yeah, I know. They could sell little fragments. Like
I think that's they said something like that it was broken and they took pieces. Definitely the rock is not. I mean, I think that if there was any kind of
justice in this world,
piece of the rock or something that we could have seen, it will have been in the documentary. Of course, knowing Henry will have been like, you have to go there because you can see the rock.
Yeah.
But no one said anything. So I think that the rock simply just.
So it's a secret.
Yeah, just disappeared, man. They didn't give a fuck. They just thought about the idea. It was cool, but I think that the whole thing ended up so bad that they were just fuck the shit forever. So that's it.
It's certainly the first tattoo-worthy Moonsorrow cover, and I would say it's probably the most tattoo-worthy Moonsorrow cover.
Actually,
it's not.
I have seen a few tattoos on the internet. People who have this as a tattoo.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, a friend of mine has that.
It's not my favorite Moonsorrow album, but I love the album, and it kind of has the most iconic look, that rune in scripture or whatever. Like for Verisäkeet, like the section of like a side of a cross, like you don't really have. Maybe the like raven from Habiteti or something, but there's very few other like iconic Moonsorrow like visuals other than the tree in the new album.
I mean, I don't know how involved they were in the serpent staff design. I mean, I think that they left it in hands of they knew what the runes had to say, but they probably left the rest on the hand of these people who knew what they were doing. It's a genuine.
I think it came out looking really good. You don't see a lot of when Immortal came out with that album, that's just the white background and who can remember which album it is?
Battles in the North.
Sure.
White background and the two musicians in front. Battles in the North, yeah.
They said the reason they did that is because in the black metal shops and in Helvete and stuff like that, all of the albums are just these black albums with a little bit of white, a little bit of red, a little bit of purple or something, and that their album just popped and stood out. And I think that's definitely true of Kivenkantaja, and I think just the white with little bits of blue and the red in the middle, I just think it's a really nice looking cover. I might not be what they had in mind, but maybe what they had in mind is that it'd be on top of a mountain and 6 guys would be standing next to it shirtless holding swords. I don't know.
Funny enough, probably if they would have been able to pull the rug wherever they wanted, probably the cover will be worse than one they got at the end. So
that's what I mean, right? Like
I mean, if you let's say from a composition point of view on the image, if you look at it, the way that how the photo was taken, the angle, how the snow is covering the rock, everything is fucking perfect. So like Ville literally says we were able to push it 10 meters. So they literally didn't fucking touch the rock. It fell there. And it looks amazing. It fucking looks amazing. So,
Get someone to draw Henry's thoughts on how he wanted it to look like. So what were you thinking? Give me your idea. Let's try and make it.
Man, I will pay all the money in the world to have a video of them pulling the rock. Honestly, it would be amazing.
You could do that for the re-release, like they did with Suten Uni.
Yeah.
The new album cover, recreated in some way.
Definitely,
but it's good. It's good as like it is. It's super.
Yeah.
I'm looking now at the notes. Let's leave it for the documentary, but definitely there's no pieces left of the rock. The rock disappeared.
All right, so I think this takes us to the end of Kivenkantaja, which actually was longer than I expected, and I expected it to be long already.
I mean, this was the first album that we really loved. I think the next one's going to be an hour per song, easy.
Yeah,
well,
for sure.
Fewer songs.
Yeah.
I don't know. We will see. I think being fewer songs makes it easier.
Good luck with Habitat.
And I'm really curious how Habitat will comment, because we all like it a lot and there is a lot to comment on it, but it's 2 songs and it will be pretty hard. In the minute 21.08, because we have to do it. So
half of the album is going to be like it's so good.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I really loved it.
In this particular case,
I know exactly what part you were referring for both of those.
I think it's definitely, at least for me as a conclusion, it's never judge an album by its cover. This particular album deserves a chance from everyone. It doesn't matter if you like folk metal. It doesn't matter if you are following this and that. It's just really deserves a go for everyone.
I agree, man. I think everyone should listen to Dark Side of the Moon. Doesn't matter what you like. Like you like music, you have to hear this moment in music. And I feel that for metal, especially for this kind of world of metal, that Kivenkantaja was a moment. And I think it takes a really driven band to capture that, to have that, and to let it go and move on to something else. Because there's a lot of bands from Finland that had big albums in the early 2000s that never tried to do anything else, and just kind of lived off of their 2003, 1999, 2001 like big album.
There's a lot of those.
Yeah, I think we're all thinking of a different band,
for sure. I think this all comes down to they probably figured out more than halfway through the process of making the album. It's impossible to do everything 100%. We have to say enough is enough at some point and just roll with it. Like album cover, last 2 songs, like 80% is good enough. You don't have to do 100% Yari. You don't have to do 100% Yari.
That's been a super frustrating thing for me because there was 5 years or so when I was waiting for Time to come out, and then I was over it. But, he's like, well, the vision that I have in mind, it's going to take so much computational power. And every time I hear that, I'm like, Kivenkantaja came out. They did that.
You don't need a supercomputer to create this shit, and you still manage to fuck up the Forest Seasons with a computer drum, even though you have Kai Hattu that could make the most beautiful drumming like Marco, but he literally chooses to do it with a computer.
I guess that kind of says a lot about it. Like, I feel like if you think your idea needs like perfect execution to work, I understand wanting to do justice to your idea and the idea of you have this album, you have this concept, and it needs to be heard at this scale. I don't think Moonsorrow could have made Kivenkantaja in 1999.
Definitely not, absolutely not.
But I also think that if the idea is good enough, it'll work. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah, exactly. And if that's the problem, that you can't get it the way you want it, maybe your idea isn't that good after all.
Yeah.
Think of how they arrange their songs for concerts. They do a lot of stuff in studio that you cannot do in concert. Then what do? They rearrange everything.
Yeah.
And in the end, it always works. There are a couple of songs that they never really dared, but come on, if they did Kaiku, the new arrangement,
they can do the new arrangement, and that's like it gets like a total Metallica vibe, and it's just super fucking awesome. Like it was incredible to see. If you could do that, you can recreate an album without having to wait 11 years.
Yeah, apart from that, it's like I think it's a lot of that. That's the reason I personally admire Henry in particular. Not because Henry is better or worse than any of the other members, but Henry has a really straightforward conception about what composing is, and it's all about work, work, work. You know, it doesn't matter if from the outside I can see a lot of concern in terms of why things take longer or not for an album, but you know, Henry is a person who constantly thinks about music, and it is not a secret that Henry struggles with that. It's you know, Henry is constantly creating, and when I first heard the you know, this statement from Jeremiah Empa saying something like, I need to have my studio. I need to help me out to pay my studio, because when I wake up from bed in the middle of the night, I need to have my instruments next to me to catch the idea. And I was thinking to myself, no, go tell that story to Henry. Henry is constantly creating, and the guy is doing producing, is doing video games, is doing this and that. It's like, it's all about the philosophy you have for working. And Moonsorrow, that they are lucky enough to have a composer that never stops. He never stops. And I think that this album is the consequence, and all the albums are the consequence of a mind that never stops creating, but more than creating, it's like he's doing it. He's putting that on paper.
And it's he, but also the band, and also this album is really highly ambitious, but it's not idealistic.
No, not at all. Not at all.
And I think this idea came up earlier, and I think it's the perfect parallel where the music of Moonsorrow, especially on this album, is really heavily rooted in fantasy, but the lyrics aren't. And it's kind of like also the way they treat the music or the band itself is this mix of half fantasy and fantastical ambitions and you know, large scale thinking, and half practical and just getting it done, and just push the rock into the forest and take a picture of it. And it's a very special foot in each world.
But not only the large scale thinking, also how much work and rework they probably had to do for every little song and every little arrangement. I can't even imagine how many hours they spent doing this. At the end of the day, Mitcha, in terms of the recording, he says that, Mitcha, we got drunk every night. We did crazy stuff in the hotel. But when it comes to recording, we worked hard. He was there alone when he did his guitar parts, and he said that it was like 8 hours non-stop. But funny enough, they say that the composing of the album was really like, it came out really fast. So if that's really the case, I mean, we are talking about the most magnificent album in the history of music. If they really did this in a matter of weeks, what the fuck? Like,
you know what? I remember reading some interview that, so they did Kivenkantaja, it was released, and they started writing music again, and they had enough songs to make a Kivenkantaja 2.
Marco said that, yeah.
But they realized that it was a Kivenkantaja 2, and they said, fuck no, we're not doing this. And that is when they threw everything away and they started working on something different and came up with Verisäkeet.
Actually, I was keeping it for the end, but Marco says with Verisäkeet, we didn't want to repeat Kivenkantaja Part 2, even if people were expecting that from us. It was Henry's idea to move forward to a darker and grimmer spectrum, to our black metal roots.
Alright, this is the end of the episode. This last music fragment was done by Francesco, as usual when it comes to wind instruments. We wanted also to talk about the history of Matkan Lopussa, as we mentioned, but firstly, this episode is long enough already, and secondly, it has taken long enough to be released, so I think we better leave that for a bonus in the future, some, 15-minute bonus episode. As for the next episode, you would think it would be about Verisäkeet, right? But no. The next episode is going to be something else. It's going to be very special. You're going to love it. So watch out for that. The Verisäkeet episode is recorded, but we have something much better to release instead. So we will release that, and then after that, Verisäkeet. Of course, I'm not telling you what it's going to be. As I said, subscribe to make sure that you get the updates, etc., etc. We have all those podcast platforms. We have the YouTube channel. We have the Facebook page, Moonsorrow Biography, unofficial Moonsorrow Biography, that is the title of the page. We have the Moonsorrow fans Facebook group. And we now also have an Instagram profile, although it's pretty much empty, but to be more used in the future, it's moonsorrow.podcast. So yeah, follow us. Make sure to not miss our super duper next episode. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.
Kun vielä varttuessa kulki kuiskaus päällä vee.
Aallot levotonna löivät vasten sateen pieksemää.
Rantaa.
Kauan hiljaisia liennet sadot valla pohjoiseen. Vain yksinäinen virtuulen soi. Keijaskarun kantajan massa saalin vierellä. Vaihti suurta laivassa puvaa.
Ei kukaan tiennyt nähdä sarastuksen. Ja päivä laski taas. Trangagrang.